All right, this is day 16, Monday, June the 4th, 2012 in Anchorage, Alaska. Call to order of the court at 8:34 a.m. Defendants present, jury not present. The clerk, all rise. His Honor the Court, the United States Dishonorable Court for the District of Alaska is now in session. The Dishonorable Robert J. Bryan presiding. The court, please be seated. First, Mr. Traverso has asked that I confer with him or that he confer with me regarding representation issues, and I do somewhat reluctantly and certainly not without Mr. Cox's approval. Mr. Traverso, it is at his urging, pardon. It is at his urging, pardon me. It is at his urging. And is there any objection if I talk with them? No objection, Scrocky, no sir. Okay, it needs to be on the record, so I'll have to clear the courtroom and ask everyone to be excused. The clerk, off record. The court. There was a juror note that I want to ask you about before we get the jury in, if that's what you're thinking. Traverso, that's right, yeah. The clerk, on record. And where is our witness? Traverso, yes, he's in the lobby, Your Honor. Yeah, okay, what we were, everybody here and ready to go? Mr. Dooley, yes. The court, everybody that's not here, speak up. Okay, now, the note I read before we recessed last week was this. Mr. Gibson was the witness. He was in the courtroom gallery on one day earlier this week. I remember seeing him and Schaefer Cox smiling at him. Signed, juror number 6. The clerk, thank you. The court, now you know. If anybody wants to discuss that with a juror or discuss it further, let me know. Otherwise, it doesn't seem to me to be anything of great moment. Mr. Scrocky, nothing from us, Your Honor. Traverso, could you reiterate exactly what she said on the note, Your Honor? I just gave it away. Mr. Gibson, he was in the courtroom gallery on one day earlier this week, and I remember seeing him and Schaefer Cox smiling at him. Mr. Traverso, just for I don't know if we need to assure the juror, but I have extensively discussed this matter with Mr. Gibson, and he was not in here. In fact, we had all our witnesses out in the lobby. We've been getting them one by one, and he was not here watching the trial. So I don't know if the juror is going to hold it against Mr. Gibson's testimony or Mr. Cox in the final run of things, but perhaps we should ask the juror if that's the case. The court, the jury is aware the witnesses have been excluded. Defendant Cox, Your Honor, I think who I saw and was smiling at was Sam Barney, Coleman Barney's brother, and he looks a lot like Gibson. Traverso, that is true, that's true. Defendant Cox, they look okay. Defendant Cox, a lot alike, it's kind of funny. Traverso, that could have been the case, he does look like him. Well, what I would like to void out of the juror on the issue if Mr. Traverso does not. No, I just said I did. Okay, yeah, it seems to me that some of her concern may be resolved by further testimony. Oh, okay. That's how we see it, Judge. And I think after the testimony from Mr. Gibson that he was not in the courtroom, and I'm advised that Mr. Cox plans to testify and he can cover that as well. And after that would be the time to ask the juror, if there's any lingering issues about that. Scrocky, that sounds good. All right, that sounds good. That's fine with us. That's fine, Your Honor. All right, bring in the jury. Well, whoa, wait a minute. Your Honor, before we bring the jury in, I have one motion to make, yeah. Miss Hayden, I thought about this over the weekend, and I would like to renew my motion to sever based on Mr. Cox's calling of Bill Fulton, which we would not have called, and I believe that the fact that Mr. Traverso called him and allowed the government to go into issues regarding the facts down at the Millennium has prejudiced my client, and that would not have happened had we had a severance And in essence, I'm fighting two prosecutors here, Mr. Traverso and the government, and I would renew my motion to sever. And Your Honor, given the potential witness list, I think that's only going to get worse. The court, well, go ahead, Scrocky. Oh, the court, Mr. Scrocky, brief, Your Honor, Scrocky. The court was going to put out that there's no way to know if there was a severance without Mr. Fulton would testify anyway. Scrocky, correct. And Miss Hayden can make her record, but there's no basis for severance. The court, I don't think there is. Okay, bring the jury in. Motion's denied. I know that you filed those briefs, Mr. Dooley. Did you get those exhibits straightened out? Mr. Dooley, yes, Your Honor. Good, thank you. Judge, they were filed in a form of a motion. Should those be, what's that? Those briefs were filed in the form of motion. Should those be denied as moot since they were ruled on previously? The court, you indiscernible. Yeah, I already ruled on those motions. The clerk, thank you. Insofar as their further motions, they're denied as mute. The clerk, thank you. They're just the same thing as ruled on before. Now, Mr. Gibson, you can just come right up here and take the witness stand. You're still under oath, of course. Be seated, Mr. Gibson. Okay, Miss Lamoureux. Good morning. Thank you. The court, I think you had no questions, I guess, Miss Hayden. That's correct, Your Honor. I had no questions. Mr. Dooley, you were finished? Yes, Your Honor. Yeah, okay. I wanted to be sure we were where we are. And good morning, folks. We're ready to proceed. Cross-examination, Stephen Gibson. Miss Lamoureux, as part of your job in 2010 and 2011, you had security clearance, right? That's correct. And what was that? A secret clearance. Did you, at some point, have top secret? I had considered changing my job in the military, and the job I was considering going to required top secret. So they they gave me an interim top secret, and we're going through the process to give me that. However, I ended up not changing, and so they terminated the process. But an interim top secret's the highest I ever had. And as part of your duties in the Army with the military police, you received briefings, right? Secret briefings, security briefings? What would you define as security briefings? Well, you attended briefing including matters related to installation security at Fort Wainwright, right? I guess you could say that. You were military police, right? Yeah. Did you attend briefings that included matters related to criminal investigations? No. You were military police? Criminal investigations are conducted either, we have CID, we have MPI, stuff like that. And the only thing that I would be told as far as going investigations would be if I was like a first responder to the case and things like that. Or if they were looking for somebody that was wanted because of a case. That's the only way that they would discuss other cases. So you did attend briefings related to criminal investigations, right? During 2009, no. During 2010 or 2011, in 2011 I did. You attended briefings related to national security, didn't you? National security, no. So if we were to call Captain Flynn, he'd tell us something different? No. Did you attend any briefings related to potential threats to Fort Wainwright? I did. And some of the briefings you attended were considered law enforcement sensitive, right? Yes, some of them were considered classified. Yes, some of them were considered classified, right? No. I've never attended a classified meeting. After your first meeting with Schaefer Cox in June of 2010, you developed a relationship with him, right? That would depend, I guess, on your definition of relationship as well. You met him in person, right? I have, yes. Outside of your official duties, right? Yes, so you call that a relationship. Any interaction I had with Schaefer Cox was outside of my official duties. So you're in uniform today, right? I am, but you're not testifying regarding anything related to your official duties, right? No. Did defense counsel or defense team suggest that to you? No, I got 10 days left in the Army and I'm on the clock. So you also talked to Schaefer Cox on the phone, right? I did. And you texted with him, right? I did. Let me go ahead and show you what we've marked for identification as Government Exhibit 789. It's up to you. You can either look at the hard copy or your monitor there, okay? You've seen that before, right? I have. Sorry? I have, yes. And that's your phone number there, is 317 number. In from the two columns, depending. Yes, my number's on there. These are your texts, some of your texts with Schaefer Cox, right? Yes. they start on the spreadsheet at approximately June 30th in 2010, and then on the second page, they go to approximately January 30th, 2011, right? Flip to the second page, please. I'm sorry, what exhibit number is this? Lamoureux 789. Do you see that, Mr. Gibson? Yes. Miss Lamoureux, the government offers... Oh, my goodness. The government offers is 789. No objection, pardon me. I have no objection, Your Honor. No objection. I just don't see how these are co-conspirator hearsay as to all these three defendants. The government wants to enter these. Your Honor, Miss Hayden against Mr. Cox, that's fine, but I don't see how these come in evidence against Mr. Vernon. The spreadsheet is not going to be in the spreadsheet. That spreadsheet is not going to be in your binder, Your Honor. Yeah, I see it's not. Okay, so I need to look at it. The witness has it right there, and the government would not oppose a limiting instruction regarding these against Schaefer Cox only. Alright, 789 may be admitted, but again, it's admitted for the purpose of the case against Mr. Cox, not to be considered by the jury for any other purpose and not against any other defendant. If you could show that to the jury, please. If you could have the lights, madam, thank you. If we could blow up the section relating to the bottom half, starting with January 5th, 2011. There's a text on January 5th, 2011 that's coming from 317 number. That's your number, right? That's correct. And that's going to Schaefer Cox, right? Yep. It says, I don't think I'll make it out before my meeting. I'll have to show up early in uniform. I'll come over from there if that's cool, right? Answer, that's fair. Then at 17:31, you text him again, hey, I just got out of a meeting. Some of it had to do with you. I'm going to bring a friend up with me, and if it's okay, I'll tell you about it. Right, okay, yeah. And then later on, once you get to wherever you're meeting with him, you tell him, you know we're here, and then you met with him, right? Yes. Do you think that those texts might have something to do with why your commander was concerned? I could see how they could be misconstrued to cause somebody, especially if it's the FBI talking to them. I can see how those kind of messages could lead somebody to a wrong conclusion. However, that's not a classified meeting or national security meeting or anything like that. Hey, I just got out of a meeting, right? That's what you said, affirmative, to him, right? That's correct. And then you said, I'll tell you about it, right? Yeah. And you said some of it had to do with you, right? Affirmative. And you had a security clearance at the time, right? Yes. And this wasn't any sort of this wasn't with any sort of approval by your command staff, right? My command staff was not present at this meeting. I'm talking about you're telling Schaefer Cox about the meeting you attended. You didn't have approval by your command staff to tell Schaefer Cox about the meeting where he was discussed, right? The meeting was not a classified meeting, and the question was, did you have approval from your command staff to tell Schaefer Cox about the meeting you had attended, which was about him? It would not be normal. Did you have approval by your command staff? No. The texts we're looking at here aren't all of your texts with Schaefer Cox, right? No. Let's go to Exhibit 426. I'm sorry, the number again, 426. I believe it's already been admitted. That's your name there, Stephen Gibson, right? Yes, and that's your contact information, right? It's quite a bit outdated, but yes. Well, that's the phone number that we saw on the text and the spreadsheet. And we were looking at, right? Yes. Did Schaefer Cox ever show you that driver's license of his embossed with those words? I can't make out what it is, but never seen. Did he ever show you his driver's license? His driver's license, no. He told you he was a sovereign citizen, right? That's correct. You told this jury on Thursday, we can have the lights, Madam Clerk, please, that you contacted an Army attorney on base, Gary Kluka, but you met with Schaefer Cox. Do you remember telling the jury that? Yes. And you told the jury that you had permission from him to contact him back in June, right? No. That's what you said, isn't it? No, I did not state that, and I had permission to go and talk to him. The attorney would have no authority or way to give me permission. To do anything. But he said, you told this jury that it was not a classified information and that it wouldn't be something I could release as far as discuss. You told the jury that you contacted Gary Kluka before you reaching out to Schaefer Cox in June 2010, didn't you? I did. And you didn't contact Gary Kluka before reaching out to Schaefer in June of 2010, did you? You didn't, did you? I'm confused as far as what you're... You didn't contact Gary Kluka before reaching out to Schaefer Cox in June of 2010, did you? The original meeting that I talked with Schaefer Cox, no. I didn't go to Gary Kluka first on that. However, before I discuss certain things with Schaefer, I didn't get clearance from the attorney first, and the attorney will verify that. I did get clearance from the attorney first, and the attorney will verify that. Clearance? Are you saying now you did need permission? No, but I had a question as far as I doubted. I wanted to make sure that certain items were free to discuss before I discuss them, due to the fact that they were carried on there in the station. The truth is, you never contacted Gary Kluka until after Schaefer Cox was arrested, right? That is not true, I don't believe. I don't know exact time frames for things. This has been a considerable amount of time ago. How old are you? 23. Going back to the day that Schaefer Cox came on base, you knew that he'd been wearing a bulletproof vest that day, right? That's correct. And others you worked with told you that they thought he was dangerous, right? People that I worked with, yeah, did not state that they thought he was dangerous until after he left. So you did know that before you met with Schaefer Cox, right? Yes. And he was armed or suspected of being armed when he came on base, right? They considered it a possibility, but if they had truly thought he was armed, they wouldn't have allowed him to come back to the secure area of the station. The marshal said that Schaefer Cox threatened to turn Fairbanks into a bloodbath if anyone tried to take his son, right? You testified? That's about that? Yep. And the marshal who came by also said that Schaefer Cox was a threat to law enforcement and that he had threatened to kill judges, right? That's correct. You didn't tell the story about that on Thursday, did you? I did state that he had made the comment about turning Fairbanks into a bloodbath if somebody threatened his son, right? And the part about him saying about him threatening law enforcement, threatening to kill judges, you didn't tell the jury about that on Thursday? No, why not? That's hearsay as far as, where is the evidence that he had threatened judges? If he had threatened judges at that point, that's what the marshal said, right? Then why wasn't he already arrested? That's what the marshal said, right? That was the words out of his mouth, yes? So you included some of the things he said, but not others, right? The U.S. Marshal said a lot of things that day. All right, I'm going to stop on page 21. Okay, picking up at page 21. And you only remembered certain ones on Thursday? Is that what happened? Some were easier to remember than others due to the fact you didn't remember that they were out of line. Threatened to kill law enforcement and judges? You didn't remember that part? They were contingent statements. The marshal explained to you that OCS would request assistance from law enforcement and that law enforcement officers would assist them, right? That's correct. And the scenario described to you was that if Schaefer Cox pulled a weapon on them, affirmative, like he'd been threatening to do, then he would get shot, right? They said that would be most likely, yes. In fact, if Schaefer Cox had pulled a firearm on law enforcement officers, he very well could have been shot, right? Most likely, yes. If a guy was running around town threatening to kill law enforcement and kill judges and pulls a gun on them, Traverso, Your Honor, Lamoureux, it's not an unreasonable response, right? I'm going to object to this question, Your Honor, because first of all, there's no found. The objection sustained. Miss Lamoureux, based on what you heard at the police department on base, affirmative, you reached out to Schaefer Cox, right? That's correct. You looked him up on Facebook? After that was what I did to try to contact him. Yes, I looked him up by Googling different sites, stuff like that. He comes up a lot. He comes up on a lot of links. And you watch some of his videos on YouTube, right? I have, yes. You watched the solution speech, right? Yes. Going to go ahead and show you a clip from the solution speech, Miss Lamoureux, and it may be the best to do this outside the presence of the jury since it hasn't been admitted yet. Your Honor, you can't just show it to him? Okay, take a break. Jury not present. Void dire. And we would like to show you a clip from the solution. It's Exhibit 920, Government Exhibit 920. If we could have the light. Thank you, Madam Clerk. Remember watching that? Yes, the government offers Exhibit 920. No objection, no objection. Your Honor, I have an objection. This does not involve Mr. Vernon. I don't know that Mr. Vernon has ever heard those words. It's made prior to any evidence about Mr. Vernon being made a member of the militia. And I don't think these words can be attributed to him, and I would ask for a limiting instruction. That's fine, Your Honor. All right, 920 may be admitted, but with the limitation requested. Okay, bring the jury back in. The time that the witness watched this was not yet made clear. Okay, and the scheme of events. Okay, and Your Honor, one of the things that I've asked for in this earlier was a First Amendment proposed instruction, because this is a misleading to a jury in sense, because advocacy of force is protected First Amendment activity. I understand that, and I think the jury is unaware of that. They will be when instructions are given. All right, ladies and gentlemen, Exhibit 920 may be admitted, but again, this is offered only against Mr. Cox and should be considered by you only for that limited purpose and should not be considered as evidence against the other defendants. Ms. Lamro, Mr. Gibson, you'd said that you looked up Schaefer Cox on the internet before you reached out to him, before you met with him the first time, right? Yes. And you looked at him up on the internet, is that right? I Googled him. And you watched some of his videos, right? That's correct. And the solution speech was one of those speeches that you watched, is that right? Yeah. What was that? Did you watch that one before you met with him the first time or a later point in your relationship? I believe I did before, but I don't know that for sure, but I would believe at some point you did. I know I did at some point. I would believe I probably did before I met him, but I couldn't say that for sure. Okay, when you Googled him, there was a number of items that came up in the results, I take it. That's correct. Okay, let's go ahead and play 920, please. Video played. If we could have the lights, Madam Clerk. So based on your internet research, you became interested in Schaefer Cox, right? What would you call as far as interested? You thought you might share some similar beliefs with him. My research was not. My research was to verify whether I felt like Schaefer Cox was a dangerous person, whether I should try to intervene to help with the thing with the OCS. It was not to make a friend. It was not somebody to whatever. It was a specific intent, and the OCS thing was resolved. So that was the goal of the whole thing. So, well, before you met with him the first time, you knew that he pled guilty to a misdemeanor related to his domestic violence charge, right? A misdemeanor, yes, and his wife, oh yes. Okay, and he requested for those to be dropped and denied that it happened. Motion to strike, Your Honor. Yes, the motion to strike is granted. The jury will disregard the reference to what Ms. Cox may have done. Although, since you brought it up, I have to ask. Schaefer Cox told you that, right? No, it was stated in multiple online articles. Oh, did you see those documents? The documents or, yeah, the articles, the documents. No. Did you see the police reports? I've seen nothing to do with the case documents. All I've seen was what I saw online. But you knew he pled guilty to the domestic violence case, right? Yes. And that was why OCS wanted to interview his son, right? That's correct. We kept talking about OCS was going to take his son. OCS wanted to interview his son, right? He did not cooperate with OCS, therefore, for the initial interview, right? That's correct, and therefore if he continued to default on the participation with OCS, they would eventually go to steps to try to take his child, to be able to interview his child, right? I mean, to me, it is my understanding if you default on your hearings far enough, they can take your child because they assume you're guilty if you're not willing to participate. Well, he pled guilty to the misdemeanor charge related to his domestic violence, right? That's correct. And before you met him the first time, you knew that he had also a pending criminal case for a misdemeanor weapons charge, right? A Class B misdemeanor, yes. So you were aware that he'd already pled guilty to one. He had another pending one, right? He was not intending to plead guilty to that. Well, did you know that before you met him? The first time? No. Okay, in your job, you didn't have access to all the open FBI criminal investigations, did you know? So you didn't know whether he was under criminal investigation by the FBI, right? No. But you knew that the FBI had come to get a copy of the video surveillance, right? That's correct. And you know that your chief of police had met with Schaefer Cox, right? I know that the provost marshal had. I don't know if the chief of police actually met with him. Do you know whether the chief of police met with the FBI shortly after Schaefer Cox came by? I have no idea what the FBI dealings were. And what about your chief of police? Do you know what your chief of police did? No, he has an office at the very back of the station. And you don't know what Schaefer Cox said to the chief of police, do you? Only hearsay. You knew he made comments about bloodshed, right? No. You didn't know that? Not to my chief of police, no. On Thursday in front of this jury, you said that Schaefer Cox's issue was a lack of communication. Do you remember saying that? The OCS issue. He just simply refused to let OCS follow up with their interview, right? So that would result in communication issue. Well, OCS was following up on the conviction, right? Yes. We know that OCS has the obligation to follow up By law, yes. So the first time you met with him at his park, you met him was at a park, right? That's correct. What did you and Schaefer Cox do with your phones for that meeting? Laid them on the park bench? And why was that? He believed that he was being bugged or tracked or something. And Schaefer Cox was wearing a bulletproof vest, right? That's correct. And he had people standing guard for him, right? I believe 2 individuals, but I know of at least one. And they were armed, right? Yes. And during that meeting, Schaefer Cox told you that he believed Alaska had no jurisdiction over him, right? I don't know if it would have been that meeting I made those comments to me about some point. I would like to clarify that as well. It's not that you'll have an opportunity on. Okay, redirect. You submitted a sworn affidavit in November 2011. Is that right? A sworn statement, yes. Sworn statement is there. He says. In there, he says, you say that when you met with Schaefer Cox at Park downtown, he stated that Alaska had no jurisdiction over him. Okay. Do you remember that? No, from the statement. Okay, did he tell you that he pled guilty to the misdemeanor related to the domestic violence case? I don't know that we discussed just the domestic violence case. Did he tell you that's why the OCS wanted to interview his son? No. He didn't state a reason why, I don't believe. Did he tell you about his pending criminal case? The one in, I believe it was the weapons charge in Anchorage? I was aware of that, yes. In Anchorage, why do you think it was in Anchorage? I don't. I heard that he missed that date, so I don't know. You told him that he should let OCS interview his son, right? That's correct. And you told him that he should show up for his court dates, right? That's correct. And you didn't tell him that there was any sort of federal plan or plot to kill him, did you? No. He already believed that, right? I guess I did share the conversation with the U.S. Marshals, but that was an individual's comments, and yes, it was that if scenario, right? Yeah. You didn't describe it as any sort of federal plot or plan, did you? No. Schaefer Cox also told you about his beef with the TSA, right? Briefly, yes. He believed they're an unconstitutional entity, and he was upset about them searching his bags or something like that, right? We've had more than one conversation about TSA. Did he ever tell you that he called TSA agents Nazis to their face? I don't believe so. Did he ever tell you that one particular TSA employee had to go because she followed rules? No. He never voiced frustration that the TSA employee wouldn't tell him whether or not he was on the list or not? No. But he did tell you that there were federal assassins who were out following him and trying to kill him, right? He didn't call them federal assassins or make those kind of terms. He did believe that there was either the FBI or somebody from the federal government was trying to. He felt that he was in fear of his life or that they might harm him or his family. After the meeting, you met with Schaefer Cox after that, right? After the meeting in the park, yes. Affirmative. You did have these. Affirmative. You did have things in common with him, right? From the limited amount of time I've been with him, I would say that that there are some things we have in common. You went to his house, right? On one occasion. You went to his parents' house, right? I believe on 2 occasions. Did you meet him for lunch or dinner? We talked about it, but I don't think we ever did. You did share some common beliefs with him, right? You would have to specify on the beliefs as far as religious beliefs, political beliefs. I don't know what you're regarding to. Well, you tell me. I don't share all of his political beliefs. You share some of his political beliefs about the common law, right? I believe in the Constitution. Affirmative. You met with the defense team a number of times, right? More than once, yes. Well, how many times? More than twice, right? Yeah, it depends on what kind of interactions you count. More than 3 times, right? Not like a sit-down meeting where we're discussing anything that happened. I've seen them multiple times right around here, just stuff like that. I don't know what you've seen them recently, right? Miss Hayden, Your Honor, just for clarification, the witness, I went through security with him. Lamoureux, Schaefer Cox's defense team. Miss Hayden, thank you. Schaefer Cox's defense team that worked for him too. Yes, Rolly Port and Mr. Diverso, right? Yes, and you actually had a recorded interview with them in August of 2011, right? I have had record. I don't know the exact time frame, but yes, I have recorded interviews with them. And you knew that they were recording, right? Yes, and nobody from the government was present, right? No. Mr. Port asked you a question. He said, now there are some things that you actually have in common with Schaefer. And what is that? And you answered political views from what he's talking about. And he said, he's for government change, not for not a forceful change, but getting other officials in, improving laws. He's for gun rights. He's against government control. He believes in common law, where people that commit a crime, instead of paying for committing a crime, they have to make reconciliation of the person they committed the crime against, and stuff like that. All the things that I totally agree with. But if you see, say for instance, you were to kill my wife or child, you can go to jail. You would serve time and stuff like that. But still, it would do nothing to me. My child or my spouse would be dead. And so where he talks, about having alternatives for where, if something happened to the breadwinner, because that they would be responsible to get the bread for that person. Remember that? Yes. And so you shared some beliefs with him. Some, yes, those were those. And I don't have a question. Okay. In December 2010, right around the time that Schaefer Cox was appearing in the state court and threatening the judges and law enforcement officers, he was keeping you apprised of. Objection to what was going on. Objection to the question, Your Honor. There's no court-related traversal. There's the objection sustained. Rephrase. Thank you. The question. In December 2010, Schaefer Cox was keeping you apprised of what was going on in the state hearings, right? As far as the state status of his case. He told me he was planning on going to court. I don't know necessarily what all was going on in court. So we can go to Exhibit 789, please. If we look on December 20th, 2010, there's a message from Schaefer Cox to you that says, all good. DA bumped the top banana, Judge, which is a first, not sure what that's about. And then a response, well, good it turned out, right? If that's considered a discussion, I suppose so. So what was in reference to his state court hearing, right? That was in reference to his state court hearing, right? If he was in a state court, that would have been the one, yes. Well, it says DA. DA, do you know what a DA is? District Attorney. Okay, bump the top banana, Judge. What kind of judge do you think he's talking about there? I don't. I was at work and he texted me that. My response, I wasn't sitting there putting a lot of thought into that text message. Schaefer Cox also asked you for phone numbers for provost marshals, right? That's correct. So he and you provided the info. Excuse me, counsel. Has 789 been admitted? Yes, Your Honor. Okay, excuse me. Go ahead. If we turn to 789, the first page, please, and on June 30th, 2010, you've got a phone number for a provost marshal there. Affirmative. And then he also asked you for phone numbers of the provost marshal in Alabama, right? Yes. And you gave him the phone number of the provost marshal in Alabama too, right? Yes. Schaefer Cox also asked you to provide training for his militia, right? Off the cuff, he had talked. He made some kind of reference to it, that it would be, neat or something. He didn't ask. He never really asked me to participate in his militia or anything like that. I pretty much made it clear at the very beginning, due to the fact that I'm a U.S. service member, I cannot participate in any militia activities. So you didn't provide the training, right? No. Let me go ahead and show you Exhibit 200, which is a phone that was found in Coleman Barney's house. Exhibit 200 has already been admitted. If you could go ahead and pull the phone out of the package, affirmative. There are some, if you look at first the phone itself, it's a yellow-green. Do you see the note on the phone? You can take it out of the little plastic baggie if you want. And you see the phone itself, the phone number there? Oh, yeah. And the phone number is 687-3862, right? That's the same phone number that showed up on the spreadsheet of the text, right? Okay, yes. And what's the note say? This phone or phone may be compromised depending on how honest our MP friend is. And then there's another note there too, right, that has a phone number for Colonel Jones' cell phone. If you open that up, right, do you see that? It's a government cell, yeah? Okay, did you give that number to Schaefer Cox? I'm assuming probably and that Stephen Gibson MP number on the note there, what number is that? That's the number I had before the one in the text messages. And you are aware that contact information was distributed on a list to the command staff? For my conversations with the prosecutors, yes. Okay, so if we look at Government Exhibit 437, there's a line there for MP phone and MP Steve cell. Do you see that? Affirmative. Do you know why your contact information was provided to them? Only speculation from what I heard from the prosecution. Well, did you give those numbers to Schaefer Cox? My cell phone, you mean? Or yeah. Okay, did you authorize him to give your number to other members of his command staff? We never discussed it. The interview that we were discussing earlier, your August 2011 interview with Rolly Porter and Nelson Traverso, they prepared a transcript, right? That's correct. Okay, I'm going to stop here on page 41. All right, let's continue with page 41 of MP Gibson, cross-examination. The interview that we were discussing earlier, your August 2000 interview with Rolly Port and Nelson Traverso, they prepared a transcript of that interview, right? That's correct. And did you rely on the transcript to refresh your recollection at all before your testimony in this case? Today or Thursday or at any point? No, unfortunately I left it back in Fairbanks, but I was planning to. You previously expressed some concerns that the transcript wasn't accurate, right? I had correct, and we corrected that. I was in the discussion about the U.S. Marshals, and you'd met with them before you submitted to that recorded interview in August, right? At the yes, and they asked certain questions and not other questions when they knew it was going to be recorded, right? I don't remember every question that was asked at both. I mean, we discussed things previously, and since then, that wasn't during that conversation, but what? I mean, you don't know whether they were picking and choosing what was recorded or not. Well, you previously said that they did ask certain questions and not right during the recorded interview, right? The questions that were asked during the recorded interview were pre-prepared questions that they were planning on asking me to record. I mean, Taylor, based on previous discussions with you, right? Yes. Has your testimony in this case been influenced by your perception that the FBI has provided information to your chain of command related to this case? No. Has your my chain of command, I don't know. I don't know if they did provide information to my chain of command. Has your testimony in this case been influenced by Roly Port here telling you that the FBI was surveilling you, recording your conversations with Schaefer Cox, eavesdropping on all your phones and your mail, and your dad's as well? No. Has it influenced your testimony here today? No, I have nothing to hide. Do you believe that the FBI was doing that based on what Roly Port told you? I don't believe they had anything to do with my dad. I mean, whether or not they recorded my phone or not, I don't know. But, well, the FBI has previously told you that you weren't under investigation, right? Since discussion with the pros, yes, with due to this case, yeah. Lamoureux, no other questions, Your Honor. Redirect examination by Mr. Traverso. Gibson, you were asked a lot of questions about OCS. You had some familiarity with the Office of Children's Services. A little bit. In my capacity, I've worked a little bit with them as being in law enforcement capacity. If there's domestic violence cases that involve children and they're notified immediately, a lot of times show up, and then stuff like that. Matters on post, yes. Okay, you also understand that matters regarding OCS, Office of Children's Services, are very confidential matters, correct? That's correct. Okay, your testimony was that the marshals made mention of Mr. Cox's OCS case, or federal officials anyway, made mention of Mr. Cox's OCS case, correct? That's correct. And Mr. Cox was a private citizen, right? He's not in the military, right? That's correct. Now, in June of 2010, or the summer of 2010, when the events occurred at the Provost Marshal's office, did the situation with the marshal talking about OCS draw your attention? Did it draw your concern? Yes, okay. And that's why I got involved to begin with. And then it was your concern that there might be that Mr. Cox's problems with OCS and the subsequent dealings with the law enforcement may result in bloodshed. Lamoureux, objection leading, the court sustained. Okay. What was your concern about what prompted you in the summer of 2010 to call or to try to find Francis Schaefer Cox? What made you get on the computer, try to get a hold of Francis Schaefer Cox? Was it because it was a nice sunny day, or was there some urgency, Objection, Your Honor. I think that's about 4 questions there. Well, the court, indiscernible objection. Traverso, what was the reason for your calling? Answer. Well, as I covered in my testimony, the reason I called was because I was afraid that there could be bloodshed on either part, whether or not Schaefer Cox felt like they were there to take his kids or whatever he believed. If he pulled a gun, if he did shoot somebody or law enforcement tried to shoot him or somebody missed, the possibility of an innocent bystander getting hit or even a law enforcement officer or even Schaefer Cox getting hit was a possibility. Okay, so that was the purpose of, did you know Francis Schaefer Cox in the summer of 2010 when you went on Facebook? Did you know him personally? No, the first thing I heard was because of him coming into the situation. Okay, and your dealings with him on a more personal level came after that, correct? That's correct. Now, we're jumping around with, then you spoke to your attorney when you went on Facebook. Were you required to contact Mr. Kluka? I was never required to contact my attorney. Okay, were you violating some military code or military provision by you contacting Mr. Cox on Facebook? At no point have I violated any kind of post-security national security policy or anything like that. Okay, if I had, I would have been arrested because, have you ever received any evaluations or performance evaluations at your job before you exit the military? I have. And have there been any performance evaluations that reflect that you went outside the performance of your duties and were reprimanded? And reprimanded? Yes. And what had happened was, when this first happened, it was a considerable amount of time since the issue happened, and then I worked. The OCS was over, life was going on. I thought it was over with, and then the FBI contacted my chain of command, or contacted the chief of police or Mr. Fisher. They contacted somebody over there who because of that contacted my commander, told them that they felt I was possibly. Miss Lamoureux, objection, hearsay, the court sustained. Okay, my commander stated to me that objection, sustained. Was there any action taken against you? I was flagged and basically barred from the military. Question, did the FBI come and talk to you in the summer of 2010 and June of 2010? The clerk, can you get closer to your microphone, please? Traverso, did the FBI, the clerk, thank you, come and talk to you in June of 2010? I believe so. I don't know the exact dates. Okay, let me ask you this. When you went to Facebook to basically alert Mr. Cox, how long after that did you get contacted by the FBI? It was a considerable amount of time later. When you say 3 months, 4 months, 5 months, it was after he was arrested. Okay, March of 2011 sounds familiar. Yes. Okay, have you been cleared of any wrongdoing? I have. There was an investigation on post where the military police investigators talked with the FBI. The FBI gave them these text messages, other information, stuff like that. They conducted an investigation. My commander conducted an investigation, and their findings were that I had done nothing out of line. And, okay, nothing illegal or against any policies, okay? And I was cleared of anything. And my flag, everything was lifted, okay? When you met with Mr. Cox, you also met with his wife, Marty Cox? That's correct. Did you ever meet with his attorney at that time, Robert John? Not that I'm aware of. Okay, do you know that he had an attorney? No. Okay, all right, no further questions. Thank you. Recross-examination by Gibson by Mr. Dooley. Mr. Gibson, prior to your testimony on Thursday, had you been seated out here in the gallery at all? In the courtroom? Yes, sir. No. Had you been smiling at Schaefer Cox from the gallery at all? No. All right. Anything wrong about giving out the phone numbers that you gave out? No. Actually, I don't remember, the one for that was out of state, I got off Google. So, and at the time, my job did include giving phone numbers. People would call on a regular basis to request numbers. So that was, at the time, that's something that I was able to do anyways. And we watched this video clip of Schaefer Cox. Part of the job of the U.S. military, part of the job of the U.S. Army is to kill, ostensibly, for liberty. Would you agree? I would agree. And the fact that our country was founded. Thank you on those questions. Ms. Hayden, no questions to court. Did you have something further? Ms. Lamoureux, just a couple of follow-up questions, Your Honor. Ms. Lamoureux. Mr. Dooley asked you a couple of questions about the role of the military. Schaefer Cox wasn't in the military, was he? No. Did he tell you that he had renounced his U.S. citizenship? Answer, I don't believe he had talked about it in regards to his son not having a birth certificate or something. I don't remember exactly, but I knew that. I don't know whether it was from him telling me that or... And he definitely told you he was a sovereign citizen, right? That's correct. And you never told anyone that you reached out to him back in June of 2010, did you? As I mean at any point, or you mean in June, I had talked to people around that I worked with. I talked to my supervisor saying, that I thought that you told your supervisor that something needed to be done. Question. You reached out to Traverso. Can he answer the question? Schaefer Cox. The court. Wait a minute. He didn't finish his answer. The witness. Yeah, I talked to multiple people about that I was going to talk to him, but I never told anybody until more recently than I actually talked to him. Miss Lamoureux, more recently being after Schaefer Cox was arrested? Answer. Had been arrested and they've asked for statements and stuff like that. Thank you. Anything further, counsel? No questions. No, Your Honor. No. All right. Thank you, Mr. Gibson. You may be excused. Miss Lamoureux, Your Honor, there's one matter to take up before the next witness. I believe if we could take it up outside the presence of the jury. Okay, let's call our morning break. So to be excused. Miss Lamoureux, Your Honor, I believe that the next witness is Mr. Whitehurst. Is that correct, Mr. Dooley? Mr. Dooley, that is correct. And we had previously raised this regarding having one of our experts sit in during Whitehurst's testimony. We don't think that having our experts sit in, but we think it falls within subsection C of Rule 615 and would request that he be allowed to sit in during this testimony. And I'm not sure whether the defendants object or not. And there is case law supporting that the expert is an essential party and that the United States versus Sekili and it's 310 F.3D 1208 and it's 9th Circuit 2002. Mr. Dooley, I don't mind him sitting in, but if the plan is to put him on the rebuttal to rebut the doctor, my doctor Whitehurst can be here for that rebuttal to put on any rebuttal. So I'm also concerned that they're going to race out and do the job right that they should have done first. Miss Lamoureux, well, first actually we were hoping that after voir dire that Mr. Whitehurst's opinions will be substantially limited within the scope of his report. But we wouldn't object to Mr. Whitehurst sitting in if we end up calling an expert as rebuttal. He has to fly out tonight, so, well, the rule provides that a person whose presence is shown by a party to be essential to the presentation of a party's cause, and you're telling me this, and are you telling me this is essential? Miss Lamoureux, this is essential, and typically expert witnesses are allowed to hear testimony. They're given facts from the case. Well, you say, Miss Lamoureux, to give their opinions. The court typically, that might be your experience. It isn't always. It doesn't always happen that way. I would not say it is typical. It sometimes occurs. Most often when it occurs, it is by agreement of all parties. So anyway, the question is, why is this essential? Miss Lamoureux, the defendants are charged with possession of unregistered destructive devices. The government has to prove that these devices were in fact destructive devices. It is an essential element of the crimes that we have to prove that the defendants are charged with, and that's why we would request that the expert be allowed to sit in on his testimony. The court, well, I think it's appropriate for them to sit. You're talking about one or a gaggle of them. One, Your Honor. The court, I think your motion may be granted. I think it's appropriate under the circumstances. Bear in mind, I've not seen this guy's report. Nobody's given me that. So I don't know anything about what he's going to testify except from the earlier motion. So, Miss Lamoureux, for the record, Your Honor, Mr. Dooley filed the late expert report at docket 387, and at docket 392 we filed a response that we understand that Mr. Whitehurst is an expert as a forensic chemist, and thus we would be able to render opinions regarding the smokeless powder and potentially the material found inside. The court, yeah, I remember. The fuse, I remember that, I do. Okay, not recall the report itself. I believe it was attached. The court, wait a minute, yes, I think I did read it. It's been so long. It's not because of my age that I forget things. It's just because I forget. Okay, anyway, that's all. That's at 387. Okay, let's take till 10 after. All rise. This matter is in recess. All rise. His dishonorable, the court, the United States Dishonorable District Court is again in session. Please be seated. I did read that report before, and I copied it off and read it again, so memory played a trick. Okay, and you're going to call Mr. Dr. Whitehurst next. Dooley, yes, Your Honor, and then you're going to take the lead on that, Mr. Dooley? Yes, sir, I take it. All right. Bring the jury in, doctor. If you could go ahead and come on up. Is that okay? Yeah. But I don't know what's on the easel. But that's not what's going to be because I have to see it. I don't have to look, Mr. Dooley. I don't have to look right at it. I just be able to see what's going on with it if you use it. Okay, and counsel, Your Honor, is it permissible for me to, who's talking? Oh, hi. Be seated, please, folks. I'd like to see what's going on written on that piece of paper as well. The court, oh, it's okay if I... Okay, yeah, counsel can move around the courtroom wherever you want. Miss Hayden, yes, thank you. The court. Okay, now, ladies and gentlemen, the next witness is slightly out of order. We often change things out of order to accommodate the witness or to meet schedules or whatever is necessary. There's nothing unusual about it to take a witness out of order. The next witness, I understand, is called by Mr. Dooley and Mr. Dr. Whitehurst. If you'll come up and be sworn, please. If you'll step into the witness box and remain standing and face the jury in the courtroom and raise your right hand and be sworn. Frederick William Whitehurst, defendant Barney's witness, sworn. Thank you. Please be seated. Yes, Your Honor. Mr. Dooley, doctor. Please attach the lapel mic. Is that all right? Can you move it up a little higher, please? There. Okay. Much better. Thank you. Yes, ma'am. Direct examination, Mr. Dooley. Dr. Whitehurst. Could you state your full name and spell your last name? Yes, my name is Frederick William Whitehurst. The last name is spelled W-H-I-T-E-H-U-R-S-T. Eventually, in your testimony, you'll give some opinions. But before we do that, we have to know something about you. Why don't you tell us about your earlier life was just the Reader's Digest version? Just the Reader's Digest version. Yes, sir, before the Army. I studied chemistry in East Carolina University. I got a degree in chemistry from East Carolina University in 1974. During my senior year there, I left the university and joined the military and spent 3 years in Vietnam with combat units. I learned a great deal about energetic materials and devices. When I was in that capacity, I returned from Vietnam, finished my undergraduate degree, and then studied my doctorate at Duke University in chemistry. I got that degree in 1980. I spent a couple of years as a postdoctorate research fellow at Texas A&M University, again in the area of chemistry, and in 1982 was accepted as a candidate, special agent candidate at the FBI Academy in Quantico, Virginia. After about 14 weeks of training, I graduated from that course and study and was assigned to FBI field officers. First the Houston office for 6 months, and then the Sacramento field office for a year and a half, and then the Los Angeles field office for 2 years. In 1986, I was reassigned to the FBI crime laboratory and underwent, about 13 months of training there. I was specifically trained in analytical chemistry to be a forensic chemist, and the materials that I normally would be reviewing were materials from bomb-making crime scenes and explosives, though I did other types of analysis during that time. During the time I was at the FBI in my training that year, I trained under the tutelage of experienced examiners. I attended outside schools. I actually worked cases under the tutelage of examiners, and in August of 1987, the FBI deemed me qualified as an examiner of explosives, as a forensic chemist, actually. And then I spent from 1987 until 1994 generally assigned to analyze explosives and explosive residues, though I did analyze other types of materials. I worked in the FBI's materials analyst unit, and during that time taught classes at Quantico in explosives residue analysis, explosive analysts. Also, I taught some of the bombing crime scene school at some of the classes at bombing crime scene schools. I also took the bombing crime scene schools myself during my time at the FBI laboratory. I went to the field on occasion as an examiner to assist investigation of various bombing crime scenes. In 1994, I was moved out of explosives. I intend continued working explosive cases, specifically what referred to as a reverse engineering, which means determining what's in manufactured explosives. I did that for another year and a half. While my replacement took over, I went into analytical chemistry of other areas, paint, environmental analysis, and in 1990 through 1998, I left the FBI crime laboratory. During the time that I was at the FBI, I acquired my law degree at Georgetown at night from 1992 to 96. That's when I was in the field. Was in the course of study. 1998, when I left the FBI, I moved to North Carolina, and I functioned there as a forensic scientist, as a forensic consultant. And I also, since 2003, I also worked as an attorney. I practiced law in North Carolina. What sort of experience have you had? You mentioned energetic materials. What is energetic materials? Well, when we call materials explosives, energetic materials is another expression for that. They're materials that enter into chemical reactions that go so fast that they release a great deal of energy and over a very short period of time, and cause what we understand to be explosions. Their effect on material is something when we see say a bomb blow up and pieces and parts go all over the place, and we see fireworks go off. Or Miss Lamoureux, objection, Your Honor. Sounds like we're getting into some opinion testimony here. Energetic materials. The court, go ahead. Energetic materials can be described as explosives, can be described as low explosives or high explosives. Low explosives actually burn and high explosives detonate. The burning process is one where energy is transferred from a particle to a particle by thermal energy. There's a flame going on. It's like you see a match that burns, a black powder fuse that burns. Let me stop you there. What was your first experience with these energetic materials, hands-on experience? Well, first in an Army basic training where they told us to throw a grenade and make sure you get it over the berm. Don't drop it in the hole in front of you. When I was in Vietnam, I used a lot of grenades, and I shot a lot of mortar rounds, and folks shot things at me and threw grenades. Okay, I'm going to stop here at page 61. Alright, let's pick up with page 61. When I was in Vietnam, I used a lot of grenades, and I shot a lot of mortar rounds, and folks shot those things at me and threw grenades at me, and I had a lot of pretty close interaction with materials going up. I was a tunnel rat for a while. I placed explosives into tunnels. I think the largest charge I placed was 800 pounds of shape charge. When the enemy threw stuff at us that exploded, that was I saw the response, the action that those explosives had on material and personnel. What experience did you have after the Army with explosives exploding, not just the chemistry of it? That would have been when I got into the FBI. I was in the field for 4 years. I did not do bombing then. I did reactive crime, which means something happens and you react to it. I also tried to focus on drug analysis, and not drug analysis, but drug investigation, narcotics investigation. When I got to the crime lab, that's when I initially became involved with explosives, with the material and the devices themselves. And your involvement was in what way? What did you do? Everything from investigation itself. I was in what was called the materials analysis unit, and I served a group of folks in what referred to at the time as the explosives unit. The explosive unit folks would bring in a device if it was still together. They'd bring in the device, they would render them safe, or somebody would render them safe, and I would look at the material inside the device from the fuse to initiate system to the main charge. If the bomb had gone off, I would be looking for what was left over after the bomb went off. When a bomb explodes, it leaves a bunch of stuff. It looks like everything's gone, but it leaves a bunch of stuff, and it leaves chemical reaction products. That's the stuff the explosive material blew up. But when it became something else, and that something else can be, you can infer from what the main charge might have been, or what the fuse might have been, or whatever. Now you, in terms of exploding things, you tell us about your experience with pipe bombs, if any. Well, the experience with pipe bombs was initially, as I was saying, reviewing first of all blast damage to the device itself, but also looking at residues that were on there. There came a time in the FBI laboratory we realized we needed to validate, determine whether our protocol, the way we were conducting our analysis, was giving us the right answer. And so we went about for residents. I needed a whole bunch of residue. I needed a whole bunch of bombs set off, and we would set the bombs off at Quintico. The explosives unit fellows would construct them, and I devised a method where you see where the bomb ranged. There was already residue there. You don't want that part that you're trying to analyze to fall on the ground, because you don't know whether the residue came from the ground or it came from the pipe, the explosive itself. So we'd wrap up these pipes in 50 feet of chain link fence, and we used a lot of chain link fence, and we blew up hundreds of pipe bombs. And the fellow that did that, those constructed according to my direction. He already knew how to construct them, but we wanted to know what residue was left. We didn't want to know what residue might have been left if you use this fuse and that or whatever. So build a pipe bomb, wrap it up in chain link fence, set it off. And I been to the bombing range quite often when we were doing experiments and bombing residue, and here's the way the device was built specifically, because we needed to control all the variables. If somebody built a pipe this way, that's exactly the way we wanted to build, so we can tell which residue is in it. So I was involved in the construction insofar as giving directions to people that actually constructed. The guys at the bombing crime scene, the bomb range, would go to a remote area and fill pipes with powder that we wanted them to fill it with, reach around a pine tree and put the cap on so that only lose their arms if the pipe went off. And when they'd bring it back and we'd go out to the range and put these tannic fence wrappings up high. And then when the thing went off, we'd go and collect the material there. I have during that time, and since undertaking my own study and studied at the FBI with creation of devices, not only charging them, but also what kind of fusing mechanism is used and what kind of container is used. Is there enough containment in the device? That sort of thing. I built the circuits myself without power. We're not supposed to build those things we're not supposed to make bombs. But we can make the device. We can put the circuitry together, which is the initiation mechanism, where say a fuse or something might be, put a light bulb so that when the fusing mechanism, the initiation mechanism goes off, a light bulb goes off instead of a bomb in your office. And I've done quite a bit of that. You mentioned these devices. You mentioned something. Tell us about your bamboo device. That was interesting. There's quite a number of ways of making switches, and when you read enough anarchist literature, and there's pretty much what we call it there are somebody thinking of how can we get this thing to go off. Time away from me. I was showing Mr. Dooley is my name. Thank you, Mr. Dooley, that you can make a switch out of a stick of bamboo and a tin can. I have a variety that grows 8 inches a day. And if you put a tin can over the top of it and attach it to a wire to it, the bamboo grows up, the tin can goes up. And if you have a wire over there, when those two wires touch, that's closing the switch. You can hook that to a power source and a battery, and then to a load or whatever. It takes something like a blasting cap or whatever. And that switching mechanism, the ways of making those switches, is as vast as your imagination. Eventually we got a hold of you, and what did we ask you to do? Your Honor, Lamoureux, Your Honor, may I voir dire the witness? Well, is it time, I guess, for this? I think it's time for her to voir dire. All right, okay, go ahead. Miss Lamoureux, Dr. Whitehurst, you haven't worked for the ATF, right? No, I have not worked for the ATF. I just worked for the FBI. And you've never provided destructive device determinations under Title 26, right? No, I have not. And while you were at the FBI, you didn't author destructive device reports, did you? No, I did not. And you weren't an explosive device examiner with the FBI, were you? No, I did not. You were in, may I correct myself, ma'am? Sure. The device has many components, and a principal examiner would come to me like the gentleman I've met today, Mr. Rigopolos, who works for that unit, and he'd say, tell me about this part of it. So the report that went out would have been a combination of reports from, a metallurgist, an explosive chemist, that sort of thing. So I'd be part of the report, but I would not be the principal examiner. While you were at the FBI, you were a supervisor of chemists, right? I was a supervisory special agent, yes. Of chemists, right? Yes. There were chemists that worked with me. That was while you were in the material analysis unit, is that right? Yes, ma'am. Okay, you weren't in the explosives unit, right? No, I was not. And it's the explosives unit. You said that you would construct those devices for the practices that you were talking about? Yes, correct. In the last 10 years, have you had any training specific to destructive device determinations? I've not gone to specialized training. I've acquired 2,500 cases under the Freedom of Information Act out of the FBI, and those involved, they are specifically from explosive and discernible. Those involve many types of devices, and that is that reading those devices and understanding how somebody analyzed on site what the device was made of, that would be, in my estimation, would be training. I've also studied electronics and simple electronic circuitry, and I'm a continual student of the literature that's in the open. Now, it's on the internet that shows folks how to make these things, but I have not gone actually to schools that are put on. No, ma'am. In the last 10 years, how many destructive devices determinations have you made? I don't make destructive determination. You're saying the thing. Okay, the sort of function that Mr. Rigopolo serves. Okay, Mr. Whitley with the AF. Okay, I don't know Mr. Whitley, but I know how. Okay, how does it? How it goes? Is it going off? I have not. Nobody's handed me a device and said, how did this function? I haven't done that. In the last 10 years, how many forensic examinations have you conducted of smokeless powders? No one has sent me a smokeless powder in the last 10 years and asked me to analyze it. I don't have a microscope, but I don't have mass spectrometers and infrared spectrometers, thermal analysis equipment. That's way beyond my limited pocketbook. In the last 10 years, how many forensic examinations have you conducted of grenade fuses? I have not conducted any analysis of grenade fuses. Nobody has sent me a grenade fuse. In fact, it would be illegal for me to have any of those devices. I am not an ATF or a federal agent. You're a busy man, it sounds like, you with your travel schedule. You're a practicing attorney, right? Yes, I am a practicing attorney, yeah. You are the sole practitioner, or I am. And what types of cases do you handle? I am a criminal defense attorney, and I am also represent parents on abuse, neglect, and dependency hearings. I've done some real estate, some wills. It's a small country lawyer's office, is what it amounts to. What sort of workload do you carry with that at the firm? Well, I try to work 12 to 14 hours, at least 5 days a week, but I'm getting old and it's down to 12 hours. I only have about 40 cases at this point. 18 months ago, I had 200 cases, but in North Carolina, we ran out of money, and so I do indigent defense work, and they don't have the money to pay folks to represent folks who don't have money anymore. Are you still the executive director of the Forensic Justice Project? I am. Yes, I am. And that has to do with the challenging FBI lab protocols, right? No, it has to do with reviewing. The deal is if we hear controversy in forensic science, and we go to try to find out if there's scientific controversy, and we collect data, transcripts, do some research. There's a number of us that in different areas that put our heads together and try to figure out, is there a controversy, or is the sour grapes between people or whatever, is this personality conflict, or is this really something that is an issue? What's the foundation for the forensic practice? What's the scientific foundation? And that's when you referenced earlier all the FOIE materials that you've reviewed. That's related to the Forensic Justice Project. I'm assuming the Forensic Justice Project did those FOIEs, Freedom of Information Acts, and is still conducting FOIEs. So you're looking at, yes, what you know, affirmative. You're checking on what the FBI is doing, right? not just the FBI North Carolina crime lab. There are forensic practices that we kind of shake our head and say, well, how can they do that? So we'll ask, is there scientific basis for it? Have the protocols that they are using been validated? That means that somebody's tested them. Sometimes we find that things are just fine, and sometimes we find that there's questions, and we provide that information to the legal community. Do you have a lab with at the Forensic Justice Project? No, the Forensic Justice Project is an organization that I'm the director. We have a number of people that we all work together. We have no budget, we have no building, we don't want anybody's money. We don't want to be attached to an agenda that money comes attached. We are, here's a scientific issue, and the internet is where we house our discussions and conferences. We go and talk to law schools. And for instance, I'm lecturing in San Antonio to judges and prosecutors and defense attorneys next month. Here are some issues that we've seen. How do we go about addressing these issues? Is there really a basis for it? Again, as I said, whenever there's any argument about human beings, sometimes our personalities get involved, and that's an irrelevant thing. We're trying to get to the meat of the science, but you're looking at the documents, right? Yes, we're looking at the documents. We're looking at, you're not physically examining items. No. You don't have the tools to test smokeless powders, for example, right? No, ma'am. I look at the data that's actually produced by the individual with the equipment. In the last 10 years, how many times have you testified as an expert in forensic chemistry? Oh, maybe 25 times in the last 10 years. I really should keep account of that, and I think it's maybe 25 times, but you might find it's 15 to 20. It's sort of, in the last 3 weeks, I've had 3 different hearings, but I don't testify in the other 2. We got to a point and it stopped, and I do a tremendous amount of consulting in hundreds of cases. But when it comes time to actually, it's been a while, I was on the witness stand, probably 6 or 7 months. And in the last 10 years, how many times have you testified as an expert for destructive device determination? I've testified about devices in the last 10 years, ma'am. I don't know if 2 or 3 times at the most. I've testified about explosives on a number of occasions. You said that when you were at the FBI, you were examining the residue or the materials from those bombs, right? That's one of the things I did. Yes, affirmative. You were doing the chemistry behind that? Yes, that's correct. When you talked about the example of building the fuse with a light bulb, yes. When was that related to? May I name a case? In the case of U.S. versus Eric Ruloff, there was some issues about remote. How do you say remote control of detonation device? And I built a bunch of devices. Man, I'm talking about federal folks here. There were no explosives. How do you make a switch go? A device has a confinement, and it has energetic material and explosive, a main charge. But the fancy stuff, the intricacies of these things very often are surrounding the switch mechanism itself. And I just built a lot of switches that have to do the detection of light, had to do with detection of motion. The same, if you get close to a building, you want the lights to go on. The thing that makes the light go on, they'll also make a blasting cap go off. The thing that makes a servo motor in a toy airplane or a toy helicopter go can also turn a switch that you can stand off from it and turn the switch that way. And did you ever do that in your capacity while you were working at the FBI? No, I didn't. Lamro, Your Honor, the government would like to renew its motion that it filed previously. Well, the motion is denied, but I don't know what the question is going to be to this witness yet, so we'll take objections as they come, Mr. Dooley. Thank you. Direct examination continued. Mr. Dooley. Dr. Whitehurst, could you give us a short course, and I know it's chemistry, but a short course in the chemistry of an explosive, that it might be where you want to use this pad of paper? If I may speak to first introduce it. Yes, sir. Sir, explosive is a material that will explode, and we have an understanding of explosion. We see them often in our life. We see them on television. Explodes based on its own energy. An explosive can be a combination of materials that when they react together give off a lot of energy very quickly, or it can be kind of material which has all the material that it needs in the molecule. As example, the oldest explosive we know about is black powder. Black powder has been around for thousands of years. It's a combination of potassium nitrate and sulfur and charcoal. And when you combine those in the right ratio and in the right manner and bring energy to them, those 3 components act by giving off a lot of energy. The energy it goes very quickly. It heats up the air and gaseous products that come off and expand so fast it creates a shock wave, and we detect that shock wave. Either we hear it or a device like say this Sharpie box. It's driven back, or if it goes at it fast enough, it breaks it. It shatters it. That would be the kind of material we see they call low explosives. Fireworks are the kind of material, pyrotechnics, black powder, a material called pyrodex, which is a substitute for black powder. There's a myriad of different materials like that you will combine things together and add some energy to them, they will explode. And there are materials like TNT. It is a molecule, a combination of atoms all stuck together. And it has in it all the things it needs when you're given enough energy for it to detonate. The energy that goes from molecule to molecule is in a shockwave. The shockwave is so hard that it breaks down molecule as it goes, and the path that the material follows is not instantaneous. You don't spark something here and instantaneously it blows up. There's a certain amount of time it takes for it to follow a path. That's velocity of destination, velocity of reaction. Those are high explosives. You don't need a container to make a high explosives go off. If you have materials that are sitting around, they're in what a chemist might refer to as a metastable state. They want to be up here. They want to be in their components down here. They want to act to make things that are at low energy, but you have to give them a little energy to get them to go off. So the energy comes in a fuse. It comes in a blasting cap. It comes in a match. Just enough energy to get some of the material to begin to react and give off enough energy, so the rest of the material carries on the reaction. When you go up to the energy wall, that energy barrier, and fall off down here, these things go down here. These products are a lot of lower energy, and that's energy difference is what's given off. So with TNT, you end up with nitrogen, nitrogen oxide, carbon oxide, carbon monoxide, carbon dioxide, materials that are not very energetic, and a lot of energy is given off. If you're building an explosive, you think about its power, its sensitivity, those sorts of aspects. Some explosives take a great deal of energy to get them to go off. Ammonium nitrate, fuel oil is one of those. You got to use a stick of TNT almost to get the doggone, or dynamite to get the stuff to go off. There's got to be a booster charge. Some, if you just blow on them, they'll go off. The combination of potassium chlorate, red phosphorus, when you push them together, will go right now. It's a very dangerous material. The way you combine the material is you combine them wet, and when the water dries, you don't touch them because they will just go. If you blow on that stuff, it'll go off. Nitrogen triiodide, which is a household ammonium and iodine mixed together. You got those crystals. A breeze running through across them will get them to go off. So you got a whole spectrum of different type of energetic materials. Explosives are actually engineered chemical systems. What work do we want them to do? Military explosives have to have their obvious reasons. You want to blow up material. You want to blow up personnel. You want to make solid objects into small objects. When you're in a mining industry, suppose you want to build a highway, the equipment that you move through rubble doesn't need a huge piece of rock. It needs smaller pieces of rock. So you build an explosive that shatters the rock into certain sizes. It's an engineered system. When you're looking at pyrotechnics, you want to see light. You don't want something that just blows up. You want to see sparks. You want to see smoke. Those sorts of things. They are engineered chemical systems. Doctor? Yes. Can we focus on smokeless powder? Yes. May I now go to the chart? Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Thank you. You can do whatever you want without asking me. Within limits. Yeah, I was going to say that, Your Honor. Thank you very much. Do I need this? Do I need this on me there? Okay. Yes, sir. The witness. It's pretty long, so it should work. Witness. Okay. Knowing me, I'll probably be able to make it work. Okay, there we go. There we go. Your Honor, I may speak to the jury, and are you going to hear over my back? The court. Should I stand on this table? What should I do? Stand on that other side. This side, yeah. Okay, smokeless powder is a material that we see in the ammunition. The uses for it, but generally we see it in small arms. We see it in a military ordnance. Military. It's what launches 16-inch shells out of a battleship gun. Smokeless powder comes in, they say, 3 types. First of all, smokeless powder is initially composed of a material called nitrocellulose. Cellulose is a fiber. It's a material that is in cotton. I have a cotton t-shirt on right now. Those of us in North Carolina, we see cotton growing out in the fields. Cellulose itself is made up of a bunch of connected separate pieces that just go on and on and on. If I can get this one right today, if you draw the cellulose structure, I'll explain this in a minute. What this is a molecule. These are carbon atoms, and this is an oxygen atom, and this is an oxygen atom, and here's an oxygen atom in the rain, carbon, carbon. The individual subunit in cellulose goes on and on and on. Where this line is right here, it connects to another one of these. Here, where this is, it connects to another one of these. To make natural cellulose, what we do is we combine this material here with nitric acid and sulfuric acid. What we're trying to do is replace these hydrogens here with the NO2 with nitrogen oxide group. Natural cellulose that has been thoroughly nitrated is an explosive material. And what happens is, let's go this way. The reaction plus AgNO3, and the reaction goes this way, and as in all chemical reactions, it also can go back. So we have to push the reaction this way, and that's what the sulfuric acid is in there. The reaction creates water. We want the water gone, get out of the way. So you put sulfuric acid as in a dryer, but you end up with nitrocellulose down here, with each one of these OH groups now replaced with an NO2 there and there. That's explosive. That's what propels the bullet out of the shell in the gun. It's also hydroscopic. That means it'll pick up water, and when it was first invented, it was a fine thing to find, but the copicity they needed to get rid of. They knew something about it, so they added nitroglycerin to it. Nitroglycerin is let's see, we'll just do it like this. It's a glycerin there, and that also has a little hydrogen replaced. And once all of these hydrogens are gone, then you have something called nitroglycerin. And I think most people are aware that nitroglycerin is a very powerful, dangerous explosive. Nitroglycerin is placed in a single base smokeless powder, or what would be without it, and it is made in triple phase smokeless powder. The military uses also a double base smokeless powder and also triple base smokeless powder, which contains nitroguanidine. In forensics, we don't see that. When I was at the FBI crime laboratory, we saw it one time. That was where the turret on a battleship blew up, and we were sent to determine what caused that problem. Okay, I'm going to stop here on page 81. All right, we're picking up with page 81. Sent to determine what caused the problem. So double-based smokeless powder contains contains nitrocellulose and nitroglycerin, but because the reaction will go back and that material would decompose, and we wanted to have a shelf life, we add an additive package. We add some small molecules, and I'm just going to let's do some dashes. Things like diphenylamine, centralite, ethyl, centralite, methyl, centralite, whatever. Those are materials that make sure that this stuff doesn't decompose. If an explosive decomposes on you, it might go off. The U.S. military, the U.S. Army had an explosive program when they test their smokeless powder continually. Because if an explosive goes off when you're not expecting it, it can be, a very disastrous situation. So when these things run out, when these materials run out or evaporate or whatever, then we start going back in this direction, and we start finding that nitrocellulose, which is explosive nitrocellulose, could actually not be explosive anymore. Those of us that use a number 1 pencil, lead pencil, see those things. They're painted yellow generally. My pencil, that's nitrocellulose lacquer. The paint on John F. Kennedy's automobile in the Dallas situation was nitrocellulose lacquer. Old film is made with nitrocellulose. It's not explosive. It just doesn't contain as many nitro groups on it. So the smokeless powder itself can decompose over time. When smokeless powder decomposes, if I end up with cellulose or something like cellulose, and I end up with a molecule that can be hydroscopic, it picks up water, and the water then, it's sort of a rider here. You got water attached in various sundry locations to this, and what water does, water has a very high heat capacity. What that means is if you give energy to it, it sucks it up and tries to become boiling. So when you heard the old expression, keep your powder dry, the reason you keep your powder dry is, number one, because the water will take, if you light a match to say black powder that's wet, what you're doing is adding energy to make molecule evaporate, and that it will take up a lot of energy. If the material decomposes and picks up moisture, then doesn't look like it looks like what's on paint or on a car or whatever. You don't have an explosive anymore. The court, let's go question by question, Mr. Dooley. Explain. Where are you getting the water that this stuff would suck up out of the air? All right. When you say decompose, it's a form of rotting. Is that correct? No, and decomposition. It's a chemical reaction. Everything here is made up of atoms and molecules and chemicals. And when rot is something that's changing the chemical composition into something else. Decomposing means we're becoming. Decomposing means we're becoming something else, and that isn't rotting. It's just changing into something else. You can see that in a car tire that's been on a vehicle for a long time, and then it gets the little etches or paint on the side of a building that starts to get cracked. That's still something there. It's just not what you started with. So what happens when you have smokeless powder that has absorbed moisture? Or do you know? What happens chemically is that when you try to start it and you try to initiate it, it may not initiate. You don't know if it's going to initiate or not. It's the same thing that happens when you throw NO2 groups off. You don't know if it's going to initiate. You see, if I add energy this end of the box and something burns, that looks really good. It only has to continue to burn. It's got to propagate down into this box. If the energy is taken away before you can get to the chemical reaction to make this burn and whatever, then it doesn't propagate. It doesn't go down to the box. Can the smokeless powder burn but not explode, or does it only explode if it says a blasting cap is put to it? We don't know. May I sit down, sir, by now? That's okay. Go ahead and sit down. Okay. The only way we can know that, Mr. Dooley, is by checking it, okay? By testing it. I'll go back to my original question. What did you ask which was what we asked you to do in this case? You asked me to review the documents, the video, and information from this case and render an opinion about the validity of the opinions that were rendered. And before we get to that, what's the definitive? What do you mean by protocol? I always thought that was just being polite at the embassy, but you talk, well, it is, about a protocol. Ms. Lammer, objection, Your Honor. It's outside the scope of his report. Duly a protocol? The court, you may answer the question. When you ask me a question, I will go about answering it, but did you get the right answer? When you ask a chemist what's in this material, you'll get an answer maybe, but you have to know that you're getting the right answer. So you have to know what you did. You have to know, it's sort of like I'm really a great apple pie baker. I can do it well, but I don't just throw everything into the pot and call it apple pie. There's a protocol that I follow, step by step by step. And when I follow that, then as an example of apple pie, I give you a piece of pie and say it's a pretty good pie. I validate that I can make a good pie. A chemist finds an unknown, and so, I need a protocol to analyze it. And it may be substance X. Let me analyze substance X, see if I come out with an answer of substance X. The protocol is a step-by-step, very in-depth steps, analysis scheme in an analytical laboratory, an analytical chemical laboratory. You create protocols and then you validate them and determine if they're reliable, if they can give you the right answer. Mr. Dooley. In this case, we're dealing with Hodgdon and Alliance smokeless powder. Do you have any observations in looking at the government's report concerning those powders? Yes, I formed an opinion and I gave you that opinion. All right. Tell us what you understand the government did in terms of getting powder to test. Were they testing the powder and seized from the trailer, for example? I understand that evidence was submitted to the FBI laboratory. It was in 2 different containers. The powder was tested by a man named Mr. Mothershead, who's a chemist at the FBI laboratory, and it was tested with a protocol, which is an updated version of a protocol that I was part of, the crew that built back in 1990s, and it was, in my opinion, Mr. Dooley, conducted in a very professional manner, the analytical scheme that Mr. Mother said. Lemmer, objection, Your Honor. This is outside the scope of his report. I think it's beyond the question asked. All right. What's the next question? And what did you do in relation? Correct. What did you observe in the report concerning the use of the actual explosives seized from the trailer or in the smokeless powder in creating a destructive device? My review of the documents indicated to me that material used that was actually seized was not that which was used to make the the test devices. What was used to make the test device? I understood it was the same brand powder, Ogden and Alliant powders, Ogden 414 and Alliant. I don't remember that one, but it was not the material that was seized. What difference does that make? I don't know the history of any of those powders. I don't know where the powder was that was seized. I understand it. It may have been outside. It may have been in weather, but I don't know the history. Because I don't know the history, I don't know how old the powder is. I wasn't there when it was purchased, and I wasn't there when it was stored. That powder could have been decomposed to a point where it would not, upon initiation, either propagate or properly give off enough energy to create an explosion. How important is a burn test? Well, first, what is a burn test? Yes, we take a small portion of the powder and either light it or match or light it with one of these things that you light in your charcoal with, a flame coming out like an upside down cigarette lighter, and see if it will initiate, see if it will burn. Okay, is it important to do that? Yes, it's a preliminary test. It does not tell you, it may not tell you that the material may initiate, but not necessarily that the material together in a device would propagate. Now, what's the difference between initiate and propagate? Well, as I pointed out, I can light the material here. I don't know how much energy it's given off, and when I do light it, I can burn nitrocellulose lacquer on a pencil, but it's not going to cause an explosion. It's not going to explode. Is that what propagate is? Propagation is as the energy wave moves down the material. Does it stop? How far does it go? Does it run into water barrier? Does it run into material that's decomposed? Does it run into conditions that will not allow the energy to move into the rest of the material? What were the weights of the materials that was seized in the trailer from the two bottles? In one, it was about 11 ounces. The other was about 5 ounces. And the size of the water bottles, 1 pound bottles. So what's that tell you? Well, for one, it tells me that some powder was taken out of those bottles at some time. Those are not, I would infer reasonably, I think that the bottles were purchased and opened and some material was removed and the seal broken. Now, why does it make a difference? Why does that make a difference to anybody? The question I would ask would be, was the breaking of the seal and the storage of the material such that the water would be introduced into the container? And it could be water in a gaseous form, or does it have to be liquid? No, it's moisture. One of the issues you've got, if you're sealed, you go back in the reverse direction, you start giving off nitrogen oxygen moieties, the little groups of nitrogen and oxygen to oxygen. If they've got no place to go, they're going to build up in there, and backward reaction is going to go. It's going to stop. It's going to go away. If you're not in the sealed container and the stabilizers are not going to be able to evaporate or go away, they're in a container that's sealed. Is there any parallel to, say, the kitchen match in terms of moisture? Yes. I've experienced when I try to strike a match and it's been sitting around for a while and it's moist, I can get it to maybe a fume and a little smoke off of it, but it doesn't burst into a flame. It doesn't function because it has absorbed moisture from the air. So ultimately, how would you have done the chemistry part of this test? Objection outside the scope. I'm not sure I understand what you're asking. The objection sustained. Okay. What did you find, if anything, incorrect in the testing of the powder? You mean a chemical analysis of the powder? Not by Mr. Motherhead's material, but the testing of brand new powder versus the old powder. What you're doing is comparing an unknown to an unknown. You test the new powder, there's a good chance it'll go off. Because it's commercial product, you've got a relatively good idea of the history of it. With the unknown, you don't know the history. And if you're going to compare the response of a known to an unknown, I don't think the data that you get from the known is relevant. So essentially, the powder from the trailer should have been used instead of the brand new powder. Ms. Lammer, objection, misstates the test. Court, answer, I think if you wanted to know if the powder would explode, you need to test the powder considering the chemistry and what we know about it and we don't know about it, and we don't know the history of the product. If Mr. Dooley, if you can tell me the history of that powder, and I know I can't ask you a question, but if you could tell me the history of this powder, then I might be able to. It stayed on a shelf for a couple of months after it was purchased, that sort of thing. I think then I would feel that we could reliably say that the new powder and the older powder would give the same results. But considering the fact that I don't have that information, I don't think we can render an opinion that the old powder would explode. Mr. Dooley, assume it was 10 years old. The powder. It had been at 60 below zero and 90 degrees above zero. Does that tell you anything? Ms. Lammer, objection, assumes facts not in evidence, sustained. Well, I think I can have an expert assume something in hopes that we can get the facts later. The part of that was an assumption that's not supported by the evidence, counsel. All right. let's go to the fuses. Do you see an error in the report in regards to fuses? Objection outside the scope. The government filed motion on this. Well, there's a couple of things wrong with the question. The objection sustained. Let me go to something else then. What scientific reason is there to do a burn test in the field and not to record it? I don't know why someone would do a burn test in the field at all. It's a waste of evidence, unless the person who was in the field was a chemist or someone who would eventually use the information. Sir, if he didn't record it, it's data that the chemist in the lab doesn't have. I don't understand why that would be done. Have you used fuses and electric matches in your experience? I threw a lot of grenades in Vietnam, sir. Okay. And they have fuses in them? All right. And electric matches are the materials that you use them, for instance, in rocket motors, these toy rocket motors. And so I tell you, acquainted with the electric matches, they're also in to set devices off, the electric match itself. The electric match is not only a device, it's also a chemical system, and you understand whether you're looking at you, I'm probably going beyond this question you ask. All right, how important is it to measure the amount of powder that you're testing? Objection, I don't know what test you're talking about here. Sustained. The test conducted by the ATF in this case. Your Honor, well, that's more than one test. Mr. Whitehurst is not a device expert. The objection to the last question is sustained. What's the next question? What conditions would make powder fail? Moisture, great deal of heat, exposure to the environment, ultraviolet radiation, extreme temperature conditions. Okay, thank you. The court, other defendants. I have no questions. Your Honor, Ms. Hayden, no questions. Cross-examination by Ms. Lamoureux. Good morning. Good morning, ma'am. You reviewed a number of photos in this case, isn't that correct? Yes, ma'am, I did. And you reviewed both Motherhead's and Mr. Ricopolo's reports in this case, right? Yes, I did. And those were dated in September and October of 2011, isn't that right? I would have to look at them to answer that. I remember them, but I don't remember the dates. Okay, but it got, assuming those dates are true, that's more than 6 months ago, right? Yes. And your report wasn't provided to us until May the 15th, 2012, right? Around then, yes, ma'am. And you didn't review Phil Whitley's report, did you? I don't remember reviewing that. Did you know that Mr. Whitley testified here in this case on May the 10th, 2012, 4 days before the date of your report? I don't remember that, ma'am. I think that I saw a motion in this case that may have mentioned that, but I could be wrong about that. Did defense counsel share with you that his testimony was what his testimony was before he wrote your report? I don't know the timing of that, but there was if I looked at the documents, I'd be able to bring that into focus. Did you know that he conduct a burn test of the powder? I've heard that from the defense counsel. Okay. Yes, because that wasn't referenced in your report. Yes, right. That was one of the failures you cited in your report, right? Yes, that's correct. Affirmative. But it actually did occur, right? Yes. Do you know what the defendants are charged with in this case? Do you know what the defendants are charged with in this case? Objection, relevance. I think you may answer. Yes, I've seen the list of charges. It was not relevant to the science, and so if you read them to me, but Ms. Lamoureux, well, some of the charges are conspiracy to possess unregistered destructive devices, possession of unregistered destructive devices. Does that sound familiar to you? That sounds familiar, yes, And that's under Title 26, right? I'll have to accept your word for that, ma'am. All right, are you familiar with the definition of a destructive device under Title 26? I've done these cases before. I can't verbatim come out with it, though. When I do it, there's a lot of other things. As you said, I'm very busy, so when I do it, I read that specifically because it's relevant to my exam. Sure, the definition. What is a destructive device? Yeah. The statutory definition of a destructive device would be relevant to your determination? Yes, of course it would. Right. Affirmative. There's nothing in that statute that requires that the items be functional or operational to meet the definition, right? I have to accept your word for that. Yes, ma'am. Let me go ahead and show it to you. Yes, ma'am. So we can go to subsection F there in 26 U.S.C., yes. Subsection 5845F, there's a definition of destructive device, and if you wouldn't mind you just reading that to yourself and then let me know if there's anything in there that says that needs to be operational or functional. Your Honor, I'm going to object to this line of question. The objection sustained, you're way beyond direct. You talked about whether the smokeless powder would function, right? Yes, ma'am. Did defense counsel tell you that when Mr. Whitley testified that powder that it performed as expected and consistent with double-base smokeless powder? No, I understood that he did a burn test of it. That's what was described to me. They didn't tell you that it was successful. I guess you'd call it a successful burn test when it performs as expected. We didn't get down to that specifics. May I explain? Affirmative. A burn test of a material is sort of like a preliminary field test for drugs. it doesn't mean that it'll function. It means that you can light that part, the material there, or a small portion of it, and it will burn vigorously. That's what it means. I've done flame susceptibility tests myself on hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of occasions, and that's what we're trying to find out. We do anything, will it do anything? Will it? And you weren't told that it did burn? Yes, I was told that the test was done and it did burn. Okay. Yeah, affirmative. But when you said, did it perform as expected? I haven't heard those words. You didn't hear the Mr. Whitley testified that? I did not hear that. And he's our ATF destructive expert. So is that something you would have wanted to have known before you made your report? Well, any data is worth my knowing, and if he did it and he said it functioned, then I'm not sure how you can use that terminology with a simple flame susceptibility test. I tried to burn it, it burned, it flashed, it whatever. But to perform as expected, you expect smokeless powders to perform as smokeless powder. And what performance are you talking about? Burning or exploding? Or, well, so the two kinds of smokeless powders that the defendants had in the trailer were both double-base powders, right? Yes. And you talked a little bit about the military smokeless powder testing. Yes. Requirements, right? Yes. You explained those tests aren't to determine whether the powders are explosive, right? That's not. No, that's not the purpose of the test. It's to find out if it fumed off, if enough of the material that makes it, to determine if it's gone. The stabilizer's breaking down, if it's right. If it's yes, that's correct. Just because the stabilizer breaks down, it doesn't become non-explosive, right? That's right. That's a point at which the stabilizer will go away. I mean, it's just not functioning anymore. And at that point, then you have a degradation going on, and that degradation reaches a point which the material doesn't function properly, right? And the concern is not that it's not going to function, but that it's going to spontaneously ignite. Yes, that's correct. And explode, right? That's correct. So that the danger or the concern that the military is trying to address with a testing requirement, right? Okay, I'm going to stop here on page 101. All right, I'm going to start off with page 101. Military is trying to address that with testing requirement, right? Yes, you want to know if the material you have is what you think we've got. So it's really about the testing for stability and storage, not about the inability to explode, right? That's correct. The point there is that it does decompose. It does. That's the point of the military, and the scientific community recognizes it. It will decompose over time. And Mr. Mothershead did examine the actual powder that was seized from the trailer back at the lab, right? Yes, he did a qualitative analysis of it, and he determined that both of those were physically and chemically consistent with the same brands of powder, right? His data establishes that it was physically and chemically qualitatively consistent with smokeless powder. They were. He did not do a quantitative analysis on it. He concluded that there were still a viable powder, right? I don't know how he did that. I mean, I've looked at his data. I used to do those analysis myself, and I don't know how he could, from the data, say it's viable. Question, well, let's see. He examined them, the physical characteristics using a microscope, right? Yes, that's correct. And then he did a chemical testing with the infrared test and the GCMS, right? That's correct. And he determined that they were chemically classified as double-base smoke with powders, right? Yes, his report said he had double-base smokeless powder there. That's correct. Now, even if the powder gets wet, it can dry out, right? That's right. And it's actually heat that degrades the powder faster than exposure, right? I haven't seen the data on that. I know that in the cold, the chemical reaction slows down, and so this is going back in the other direction, slow down. But we have polymeric system there. It's a cellulose, nitrocellulose stuff. And does the cold separate the nitroglycerin and the nitrocellulose? There's a lot of questions there. Does the cold actually break down the structure of the nitrocellulose? I mean, yeah, the nitrocellulose. I looked for that data. I've looked for that data. And that's not what I'm looking for, ma'am. It's like I don't know the history of this stuff. I don't know its history. So trying to discern if I put it in the worst environment it could be. It gets cold in Alaska, and there is data out there to support that. They're still viable after going through a certain amount of environmental impact in this area. I haven't seen it. The only way that I could see it to test that, I worked smokeless powders pretty heavily when I was in the FBI. I'm sorry to interrupt, but I can't even remember what question I asked you. Okay, yes, ma'am. Miss Lamrell's trying to be sarcastic. The conservative estimate for the shelf life of the smokeless powder is decades, isn't it? The conservative estimate for a shelf life on a shelf, yeah. Is that right? Okay. Yes, that's right. Okay, and both of the powders in the case were less than 10 years old at the time of seizure, weren't they? Yes. Were they on a shelf during that time? I'm asking you, both of the smokeless powders in this case were less than 10 years old at the time of seizure, weren't they? Yes, that's correct. Okay, and you indicated that they weren't full when they were seized, right? The containers weren't full. That's correct. Or, well, they didn't contain what the bottle said they should, right? Contain, right? Yes, some of it had already been used, right? We could infer that, yes. In that climate, it was stored in Fairbanks, right? That's where it was found. Okay, it was found in Fairbanks, right? I don't remember that. I'm sorry, I'd have to look at that's okay, crime scene report. After you reviewed Mr. Motherhead's report, you sent an email to defense counsel, right? And you had a good opinion of Mr. Motherhead's analysis? Yes, and I still do. Okay, affirmative. So you don't know it at that time, but when you wrote your report, Mr. Whitley had done a burn test of the powder on site, right? That's correct. And then Mr. Motherheads did a physical and chemical examination of the smokeless powders that were seized, right? That's correct. And then when he did the analysis and compared the samples to known samples from the same manufacturer, same brand of powders, right? That's correct. And then out on the range, FBI tested the same known brand to see if it would work, right? That's correct, and it did work, right? What I saw, if that was the powder that was used, it did work, yes. The known sample, yes, and was tested, and yes, worked, right? Affirmative, Miss Lamrell, no other questions, Your Honor. Mr. Dooley. Mr. Dooley. Smokeless powder that does not work is still called smokeless powder, correct? Yes. You were asked about it being on decades-long shelf life. What does it mean if it's sitting on the shelf? What kind of condition are you expecting that bottle to be? On a shelf in a facility that is not exposed to the environment, I go to the gun shop. I see they've got smokeless powder that's been on the shelf for a while, I guess. I don't know. That's what I'm talking about. I'm not talking about, they could store it in warehouses for all I know. I don't buy even so. That's why I asked, was it on the shelf? How about if it was opened on the shelf? Well lasting. So for decades? It's again according to the environment where the shelf is. If it's a chemical system and it's exposed to, if you put the shelf out in the woods, it still might be a shelf. But that's kind of how, would you say, not very well described word shelf life. Shelf life, I would take it, would be reasonable shelf life. It's in somebody's home, it's in a building or whatever, and you are aware of whether or not the defense asked to go to the test by the government. I was told about that, sir. And did you attend any tests by the government? No, I did not. And what was the reason you were told? Objection, sustained, no, okay, further questions. Anything further of this witness? Recross examination. Miss Lamrell, when were you retained by the defense counsel in this case? Oh goodness, ma'am, I think it was 6 or 7 months ago. I didn't bring my file with me, I'm sorry. It probably would be discernible from the first emails that went back and forth. We just got those last night, so give me 1 second to sort through them. I don't have them organized. The message that I have would be the subject line of retainer. Is that dated May the 2nd? But you were talking to them before then, right? I probably was. I talk to folks before they pay me or they decide whether they're going to pay me or not. So it was, but it would have been before that, maybe a couple of months before that. It might have been. Sometimes they're so impressed they hire me immediately. But not when the tests were conducted back in the fall of 2011, right? No. Thank you. Anything further? No, sir. Thank you, Dr. Whitehurst. You may be excused. Thank you, Your Honor. Okay, we'll go back to Mr. Traverso's witness. Okay, you folks might as well take a break while we're getting the next witness in. Hopefully it'll just be a second. Be seated, please. All right, the records show that Mr. Traverso left the courtroom, apparently looking for a witness. Nothing happened except that I excused the jury, and no one said anything while you were out of the courtroom. Mr. Traverso, you don't just walk out while the jury's sitting in the box. Traverso, right. Leaving your client without representation, I think that's the second time a similar thing happened in this case. And if you need to do that, you should ask permission. I should excuse the jury while you go do whatever else. Bad things can happen with the jury in the box and counsel not present. Your witness is present, I take it. Traverso, yes, Your Honor. All right. Hayden, Your Honor, before we bring the jury back in, I would like to again renew my motion to sever based on the testimony of Dr. Whitehurst, specifically his testimony regarding switches and blasting caps, which I feel is prejudicial to Mr. Vernon, and would have not have occurred but for the fact that we're joined. The court motion is denied. Okay, bring the jury in. Okay, you may call your next witness. Thank you, Your Honor. I'll call Aaron Bennett. Mr. Bennett, if you would like to take the stand there, please. If you'll step up to the witness box there, Mr. Bennett, and face the jury in the courtroom, raise your right hand. Aaron Bennett, defendant Cox witness, sworn. Thank you. Please be seated. Traversal. Good morning, Mr. Bennett. We're almost at noon. Could you state your name for the record and spell your last name, please? My name is Aaron Bennett. Last name Bennett. Mr. Bennett, where do you live? I currently live in what's considered North Pole, Alaska. And I like to promote violence and get Schaefer in trouble. And I like to talk smack about Schaefer. Question. Okay, how long have you lived there? For about almost 5 years, 4.5 years. And what kind of work do you do? I'm involved in quite a few things. I own a construction business, and that does military housing. I do that as a subsidiary under my oldest brother. I own a surplus store and sells tactical gear. It's kind of like a hunting store, only geared more towards law enforcement type stuff. I own a bounty hunting business, a security business, and other small ventures like that. I also have a CDL and drive the ice road up to the North Slope. Okay, a kind of a jack of all trades, huh? Yep. Now, are you involved with a radio talk show in Fairbanks? Yes, I have a show on Mondays and Saturdays. Okay, and what is the name of the surplus store that you have? Far North Tactical. Okay, does it have another name that it's known by in Fairbanks? A previous name that it's off? It's been the building, landmark for the indiscernible, that I'm in right now is a historical landmark. It used to be Blondie's Supply Store. Right. And he was murdered a few years ago by some Army personnel. Okay, do you know Francis Schaefer Cox? Yes, I do. Okay. And how do you know him? When he first started to become a public figure in Fairbanks, I went to a couple of his Second Amendment Task Force meetings. That's when I first saw him with my own eyes, and I met him, I believe, at Denny's. He was the first time I ever formally met him. I had known who he was prior to that, though. Before he ever became known in Fairbanks, I was aware of him. Question. Okay, how would you describe your relationship with Mr. Cox? Over the course of about a year's time, we became pretty good friends. We were like-minded on quite a few things. He had hung out with me quite a few times. For instance, he's been bounty hunting with me before. Question. Back in June of 2010, how would you describe your relationship with Mr. Cox? I think by that, June of 2010, we weren't the closest of friends anymore. Okay, do you know a gentleman by the name of Bill Fulton? Yes, very, very close friend of mine. Okay, and how long have you known Mr. Fulton? I don't know the exact dates, but him and I were really close friends before I ever moved to Fairbanks, Alaska. I lived in Anchorage, Alaska about 8-9 years, and him and I were very close, very close. We were so close, we were just standing right next to one another. I just was very close, very, very close to Bill Fulton. I spent a lot of time in that man's home. Oh, man, Bill Fulton is a sodomite approver, loves sodomite marriage and all that. I wonder what him and Aaron Bennett got going on. I spent a lot of time doing numerous things with him. We did a lot of business together. He worked for me for about a half a year because he lost his job at the ammo can. I felt sorry for him. Even though I knew he didn't have the trade set that required him to work for me, I gave him a job anyway. I was really good friends with his family. Spent a lot of time in his home. Oh, did you now? Okay, to your knowledge, did Mr. Fulton belong to a militia in Anchorage? No, not an organized per se fashion, no. Okay, but did he ever speak about a militia? Yes, he had asked. Scrocky, objection, hearsay. Traverso, he has any knowledge about that, personal knowledge? Well, the question was answered. Did he ever speak about the militia? The answer is yes. Traverso, okay. What's the next question, Judge? Traverso, what was your relationship with Mr. Fulton in June of 2010? We were sodomites. No, that's not what he says. Okay. Answer. In June of 2010, Fulton and I had a very close relationship. How many times is he going to tell the courtroom he's had a close relationship? We referred to each other's stores as sister stores because in all reality, we were sister stores. We helped each other out with everything. I would go down and see him and he would come up and see me. He never really liked to come up and see me, but I would go see him a lot. And I finally talked to him into coming to see me on the pretense that he that the last event that I held, which was a fundraiser, I did really well. I told him that he could probably do really well. And so he said he would come up and do a fundraiser with me. So at that time we were very, very, very close. I was very close to Bill Fulton. My goodness. Never seen a man talk about how close he is to another man. When did you speak of his business? Is that the drop zone? That would be the drop zone, yes. Bill and I helped him start that store, all the way down to the physical labor of cutting boards and making the displays and things of that nature. He indirectly helped me start my store, advised me because he was doing it for about a year. He helped steer me along a lot, the legalities of it. And at the time, we were doing a lot of trading back and forth, definitely. Okay, in June of 2010, was there a fundraiser in Fairbanks that sponsored you through your shop? Yes, that was the Alaska Conservative Coalition, who Maria and Bill Rensel were the primary people on that. Okay, was Mr. Fulton invited to this affair? Yes, by me. Okay, and did you know whether or not he had an associate with him at all times when he came up to Fairbanks? Sure, he had a gentleman that he liked to call Jesus. His actual name is Kyle. I always called him Jesus, just to put a pun into calling him Jesus. But that was pretty typical, If I came down and saw Bill down here, Jesus was always with him. Okay. When Mr. Fulton came up here, did he state a purpose in mind? Other than making money? Yes, okay. No, not initially when he came up. He came up to make money. Okay, did Mr. Cox's name ever come up in any discussion that you had with Mr. Fulton? No, not at all. Okay. He never showed any intent to talk to Schaefer at all. The only conversations me and Bill have had about our Schaefer up to that point was how much he hated him. Let me read that again. The only conversations me and Bill have had about Schaefer up to that point was how much he hated him. Okay, that Mr. Fulton hated Mr. Cox? Right. I could have never imagined at any moment that he would want to see Schaefer Cox. Okay, all right. Well, then Mr. Fulton was there. Did you know whether or not he was acting as a government informant? Absolutely not. Okay, did anything change your mind about that? I can't say that I ever directly had the suspicion that Bill Fulton was an informant and trying to set anybody up. No. Trying to set anybody up. Well, he knows exactly what Bill Fulton's doing, don't he? Okay, did something occur at the Blondies that day regarding a man by the name? Well, let me ask you this. Was there a man by the name of Les Zerby? Les Zerby was not present on the day of our fundraiser? No, not until the end of the day. Not until the end of the day? Yes. Okay, let's start at the beginning of the day. Did you have any discussion with Mr. Fulton regarding Mr. Cox? Well, at the beginning would be the night before when he showed up and we set everything up. Okay, and I showed up in the morning. Actually, I was planning on being there around 10 o'clock, and I got a bunch of texts and phone calls from Bill that I needed to come earlier because there was urgent business he needed to talk to me about. I kind of put that off because I've known Fulton for years and years, and he kind of, in a personal opinion, he's kind of a drama queen about everything. So I just kind of put it off. I showed up, and he was very irate with me for not hurrying because he had important things he wanted to discuss. He had already pre-bought me a coffee. He was waiting on me. He said, "Here's your coffee, follow me." And we went on this big circle around the block. He kept wanting me to go farther and farther, and it was raining, it was drizzling. And I wanted to go back to the shop. I had my partner there, and all the people there were setting up, and all these people I'd invited. I was kind of irritated myself. And then he started to tell me why he had me out in the drizzling rain instead of attending our event that we'd set up. Did he try to involve you in something that he was trying to do regarding Indiscernible? He explained to me that the reason that we were on this walk is because he had objection, calls for hearsay. The court sustained. Okay. Traversal. Mr. Fulton was a government agent, Your Honor, a government informant. We believe that his statements are statements of a party opponent. Scrocky. Rule doesn't work that way. The court. No, the objection sustained. Traverso. All right. Traverso. Well, when Mr. Fulton was here, did you observe anything unusual happen at the store? As far as the daily proceedings of selling stuff to the public on a mass scale, was there a meeting later on that night? There was a meeting later on that night that I instigated, I put together. Okay, was Mr. Cox there? Yes, I invited him. What time did you invite him? I don't recall. I don't remember exactly. Probably, yeah. I think that I was getting very concerned inviting people. I invited numerous people. That was about an early afternoon. I started getting very concerned about the things I talked with Fulton about and started calling anybody that I thought Schaefer Cox might respect. Okay, and you did that for the purposes of this meeting. I instigated the meeting. This meeting was supposed to take place. It wasn't even supposed to take place. I was asked to be on board with a certain plan that Bill unveiled to me earlier in the morning, and I had been stewing it over it. What had been revealed to me alarmed me, and I had been told it was all put together by Mr. Cox. So I took action, and the action I took was to call anyone that I thought Mr. Cox might respect or revere, and that would be all of his closest friends or people that I knew that he had at least had some regard for. And then I called Schaefer Cox, and I did not make Mr. Cox aware that he was walking into a room full of people. I also did not let Bill Fulton know that I had called all these people. Well, didn't you just set everybody up just grand? Okay. Neither gentleman was aware when they walked into my store at the end of the day that they were walking into a room full of 10 plus guys. Okay, what time was the meeting supposed to start? I don't remember. I believe the event got over at 7 because that's our normal closing time for the store, and I believe it happened after that. There was a bunch of to-do about getting some beer and this and that, and Mr. Fulton doesn't like to do anything without a few beers being present. Okay, did eventually Mr. Cox show up with somebody else? Yes, Mr. Cox was pretty late coming. I do remember that. There was a lot of just typical BS going on between all the people there. Rambunctious talk. Just guy stuff. And you mean, okay, it's time we broke for lunch. Reconvene at 1:30, folks. Don't forget to follow my instructions about recess and be back ready to go at 1:30. All rise. This matter is in recess. All rise. This dishonorable court, the dishonorable district court, is again in session. Please be seated. Okay, bring the jury in. Traverso, you may continue. Traverso, thank you. Traverso. Question to Mr. Bennett. I think I left off around discussing the meeting. What was the purpose of the meeting? The purpose of the meeting was instigated by me. I don't think that. Well, I'm 100% sure that neither Bill Fulton nor Schaefer Cox intended for there to be a meeting of any kind, especially instigated by me at my store. But if I could reiterate, I was concerned about a plan that had been unveiled to me earlier in the day by Mr. Fulton. And he indicated to me that Mr. Cox, objection, hearsay, Traverso, you can't. The court sustained. Traverso. Don't talk about what someone said, but you can talk about your personal knowledge of what you observed that day. Let me ask you another question. Who was in attendance at this meeting? I asked Bill Rensel to come. I asked for my close friends, Jeff Labruski, to come, Dave Giesel to come. I asked Mike Anderson to come. And we're on page 121. I'm going to pause and stop right there. Page 121. All right, let's continue on page 121. The direct of Aaron Bennett. I asked one of my close friends, Jeff Labruski, to come, Dave Giesel to come. I asked Mike Anderson to come. I asked, his name is eluding me. He is a pastor down in or up in Fairbanks. Who else did I ask to come? My partner, Luke Lovejoy. I asked him to come. Okay. Well, you called me this morning. What do you want to discuss at this meeting? I had a meeting where Mr. Fulton stepped out, where I told everyone present, this was before Schaefer Cox showed up, why I asked them all to be there. I told them that I was privy to a plan to kidnap federal judges and put them on trial, and I had been asked to be involved in the kidnapping of federal judges, and I put them on trial, and that I was under the impression that this was Schaefer Cox's plan. I had invited Schaefer Cox there basically with all of his peers that I just invited. My intent was to expose this plan, that all would be by proxy be dragged into and show, basically we were having our own little trial right there. Here's what this man and my intent was. Here was this. What this man intends to drag us into, what do you guys all have to say about this? That was my intent. And Fulton came back into the store and produced alcohol, which at that point I insisted that he unarm himself because I'm not a big fan of the way he carries his firearm, which is racked in the chamber at all times on his hip with the hammerback. I don't really feel comfortable with a firearm in my presence like that, especially with alcohol. Usually I don't say anything to Mr. Fulton because we're such good friends about his choice of how he carries his firearm, but at that time I asked him to please remove it from our presence. Okay, let me ask you the next question. Were people allowed to have their cell phones at this meeting? Oh, no, they weren't. Mr. Fulton insisted. Once I made a demand of him, he encountered with a demand of his own, and that everybody would give up their cell phones, which they did, and he secured everyone's cell phones and gave them all to Jesus. And then he asked Jesus to stand guard in front with a sawed-off 12-gauge shotgun and the 1911. Oh, Bill, you're something else, ain't you? To stand guard, quote, unquote, which I was also bothered by. But Bill countered back to me that, well, Jesus isn't going to be drinking, this and that, and I just would feel a lot more comfortable if he was standing guard. Okay, at some point, does Schaefer show up? Yeah, probably. This is a guesstimate. About an hour after, we'd all just been sitting there, like I said earlier, milling amongst each other. Schaefer did show up and showed up with Les Zerby, and I believe he had his son with him. Okay, if I remember correctly, all right. What, if anything, did you observe happen when they joined the meeting? Nothing immediate. Mr. Cox got there. My store is laid out kind of like this room is. This would be the cash register, which would be like a podium. Everybody was sitting in a horseshoe shape around me, and Mr. Cox sat on my left with Les Zerby, which just happened to be same side Mr. Fulton was on. Most everybody else was spread out on my right. I'm sorry I missed you. Were Mr. Zerby standing? With Mr. Zerby standing? Les Zerby was immediately to your left, to my left. Okay. Schaefer Cox, Mr. Fulton, okay, and then everybody else was spread out from there. All right. When he first got there, I opened up by talking first. My store, my rules, I guess. I reiterated that I'd already said to everybody there when Bill was out of the room. I said, here's what Schaefer is planning on getting us into, this and that, and Schaefer immediately started to object to what I just said, and as soon as he started to object, Bill jumped in and started yelling at Schaefer. Oh, don't deny your plan, this is your plan. Started yelling and screaming at him, and they were having this confrontation, which we managed to slow down a little bit and calm it down, and I chastised Bill for being so ridiculous and just calm down. I said, I just want to get all exposed, so I want Mr. Cox to have a chance to say what his plan is, right? So Mr. Cox starts to go on and tell what the plan is, and he unfolds this plan of how the state is after his son and talks about how in the event that the state comes after his son, he would like to have a way to have protection from that if the state tries to take away his child. And I was like, what does federal judges have to do with protecting your son? And Mr. Cox was like, I don't know what you're talking about. And that's when Bill absolutely went nuts. Cannot you guys see that Bill Fulton set this up and Aaron Bennett set it up to make Schaefer Cox, look like he's trying to plan some crime? He started screaming, you know the agreement we made last night. I have wheels in motion. I have people coming from all over the world. Hey, Bill, you're a good liar, ain't you? I have spent already $10,000 to $20,000. Hey, which is it, Bill? 10 or 20? That's a big difference, He started screaming about how much money he spent, and this is what Les Zerby stepped up and said, hey, now, you just wait a minute here. You just wait a minute here. Then Bill Fulton pulled out a knife that he had on him and ran Les Zerby into the corner. And in my store, there's another room in back that's open there. It's where I keep all the body armor that I sell. And there's a flag stand there. And Les Zerby retreated to get away from Bill and actually ended up going into my flag stand and kind of disappeared in there. You couldn't have seen him anymore. He was engulfed in flags. And Les Zerby was armed. He's the only person in the room I remember that was armed. I almost 100% positive he was armed. Had a firearm on his hip, which he did not pull or touch. But Bill got up on... Where's it at? But Bill got up on him and told him he was going to cut his throat if he said another word. If he talked, if he opened his mouth, if he said anything. And Les Zerby tried to say something again. And when he did, he's like, I already told you I'm going to kill you if you say anything. So Zerby actually never stepped out of the room again. I never even really saw him again because that room was dark. I didn't have the light on. He just stayed in the shadows. I think he was pretty scared, obviously. So after that, Bill turned on Schaefer and just went on the hugest tirade about how they had made this plan the night before, which I was aware of the plan because Mr. Fulton had already told me this whole plan. And Schaefer kept protesting that, trying to protest that he wasn't even aware of what Fulton was talking about. I managed to finally calm Bill down. Schaefer wasn't allowed to talk. Bill wasn't allowed to talk. I went around the room and let every single person present make a statement of why they weren't okay with this plan and why they weren't going to support it. The plan that Schaefer had nothing to do with? Hold on just a second, I gotta pause. Okay, picking back up at page 126. I went around the room and let every single person present make a statement of why they weren't okay with this plan and why they weren't going to support it. And after every single person got to say that, then it was Schaefer's turn to talk, and Schaefer said, Mike, Dave, these are two guys that I invited. That would be Mike Anderson and Dave Gissel, who he addressed, who happened to be sitting together. He said, you guys are my best friends. He said, and this and that. He said this and this. This isn't what happened. And that's all he ever got to say because Bill went nuts again. Do you not see how obvious it is that Bill Fulton is a complete retard, a fraud, setup, just a complete corrupt individual trying to set Schaefer up? I mean, it's just so obvious. Even Aaron Bennett, this is coming out of the mouth of Aaron Bennett, who's not even Schaefer's friend, probably a government informant himself. The only reason that Aaron's probably having to tell the truth is probably this whole thing is on recording somewhere, and so Aaron Bennett is forced to tell the truth because they know they have it recorded at somewhere that could be released at some point. He said, you guys are my best friends. He said, and this and that. And that's all he ever got to say because Bill went nuts again. Shut your face. I spent so much money. You made this plan, and it was basically digressed from there into nothingness, and everybody just got up. We're done here, and everybody walked out. Okay, did you have any further contact with Mr. Fulton after this? I guess it's a meeting. How did you have any more contact with Mr. Fulton afterwards? Is the question regarding that same day? You want to include, did you have a further contact with him that day? Well, sure, him and I talked afterwards. Okay, how about months later? Did you have any further contact? Absolutely, me and Bill are very, very close. Hey, Aaron Bennett, how close are you with Bill? You're very, very close? How many times are you going to tell us that you're very, very close? When he goes to the bathroom, do you help him wipe? Hey, Bill, how close are you to... Hey, Aaron, how close are you to Bill Fulton? What a freaking retard sodomite, man. Me and Bill are very, very close. Okay. Okay. At the time of the meeting at my store, I had a very mixed emotions on because I knew Bill so well. I had a hard time not believing his story of the events. It took me a while for it to dawn on me that, well, maybe Schaefer Cox isn't always lying or whatever else. I mean, my relationship with Bill is one where I've been in his crawl space many times, and I've been to his house, and we had dinner many times. I was very good friends with his wife. We called Scrocky. Objection, narrative, traverso. That's fine, that's fine. Sustained. Back to your... Did everybody leave the meeting, walk out, including Schaefer, after what happened to Mr. Zerpe? Yeah, I locked up my store, but I didn't leave anybody in there. Okay, well, I know you locked up the store, but no one stood around and talked a little bit. Everybody just got out of there. Me and Bill did, okay. Everybody else cleared out quickly. It was actually very late by that point. I can't remember how late, but I know it was late enough, though. Objection, narrative, traverso, okay. And we're done answering the question. Yes, sustained. Traverso. What if I can go back to your store? How were you guys going to raise money? How was the fundraiser? How was money raised at this fundraiser at your store? What kind of stuff are you selling? I do a fundraiser basically as a publicity stunt, so to speak. I go to organizations that I at least semi-agree with, which in this case had been the Alaska Conservative Coalition or the Fairbanks Conservative Coalition, what have you, and I told them if they did advertising on the radio that I would throw in the fundraiser. So they put mass advertising on the radio for one whole week, which obviously is going to reach a lot of people. It's going to give me a lot of exposure. I'm going to get anywhere from 1,000 to 3,000 people potentially. At least half of those have never been to my store. So that's my motivation on my end. I'm not greedy, so I invite people like Bill Fulton. I also invited the Munitions Cache, the Rob Carr runs, him and I are very good friends also. And I invited the 6th Avenue Guns, one of my biggest competitors, but I figured might as well have him over. He ended up declining, but just to give you the nature, I would let anybody come. Well, let me stop you right there, if I may, Mr. Bennett. So you sell launchers or Hornet's Nest canisters there? I sell by and large most of the products that A-List Technology makes. I used to. Okay, and do you Are most of your customers people who belong to the militia or general public? Objection, speculation, foundation, court. That's fair objection. Traversal. Who do you know? Who do you track of your customer base is selling those is for selling those firearms? Primarily military. The first 2 years I was in operation, it was primarily law enforcement that would shop at my store because I had an exchange program for body armor, which they definitely took advantage of. And as we became better known, it's been predominantly law enforcement. A lot of agencies shop there, like forestry department and nature, things of that nature. We get special requests from biologists a lot up to the North Slope. They'll order certain products from us, predominantly A-list technology products, because they're less lethal, of course, and they're going to use an animal control environment. I would say probably the objection narrative. Sorry, that's all right. You can go. Mr. Traverso, you see guns there and other things of them. Do you sell grenade bodies there? I have been selling firearms for the last year because we did not have an FFL up to that time. Do you sell grenade bodies there? I do sell paperweight dummies. Okay, I have no further questions. Thank you. Mr. Dooley, Mr. Bennett, indiscernible, your microphone, please. As long as we can stand up. Other than in the newspaper, have you ever met Coleman Barney? Not to my recollection, no. Have you ever talked to him on the phone or any other time? Not that I know of. I can't remember a single time that I ever met him. The only time I thought I met him, I figured out later that I was actually talking with JR. No further questions, no questions. Hello, Mr. Bennett, good afternoon. Good afternoon to you. You mentioned on direct examination you made a bunch of phone calls to get people in the Schaefer, that Schaefer respected. Yes, you did that, correct. Some of them were actually at the fundraiser, so I was able to approach them directly, I'd say. So probably a little more than half. So some were there already, yes, sir. Okay, and did he come with Mr. Zerby in tow? Did they arrive together, or was Mr. Zerby there already? I don't remember. I believe they came together. I know that I didn't, to my recollection. I don't believe I called Les Zerby and asked him, I think. You don't recall? I'm almost 100% positive they came together. Okay, but you don't recall calling Mr. Zerby? I don't recall that, no, but somehow he got there, right? I assume that he came with Schaefer Cox. Okay, you mentioned that Mr. Fulton or Mr. Cox, one of the two, you can correct me where I'm incorrect, had mentioned meeting the night before. Only Mr. Fulton. Mr. Fulton, are you aware that Mr. Cox, Mr. Zerby, hold on just a second. So this is Scrocky on cross-examination to Bennett. Mr. Fulton, are you aware that Mr. Cox, Mr. Zerby, and Mr. Fulton and another person met indeed the night before at Pike's Landing and had a meeting? I was aware on hearsay from Bill. Okay, so you weren't aware there at that meeting? No, I was not. You don't know how long it lasted? No, I do not. And I was only told the details from Bill. Okay, you don't know what the subject matter was discussed at the meeting, do you? Traverso asked and answered, Your Honor. That's the day before he says he had no personal knowledge of it. Sustained. Well, you weren't there? No, I wasn't there. I got a choreograph of what happened from Bill. Okay, and you never talked to Mr. Cox about what happened at that meeting? No, I did not. You don't know if the meeting was recorded or not? Do you? No, I do not. When you mentioned that you called these folks together, you said Mr. Cox, neither Mr. Cox nor Mr. Fulton knew they were walking into a meeting with 10 people. I can't even remember exactly how many guys were there, but I'm not trying to pin you down, but no, Mr. Cox did not know. I did not tell Bill that I was having a meeting with all these people there. I told them that I was having Schaefer Cox there. They wanted to talk about it and to affirm it. My knowledge, Fulton thought it was going to be me, him, and Cox. I see, and so all these other people showed up because you were trying to do the right thing, essentially. I guess you could call that. It was an act of self-defense, is how I see it. Are you sure it was federal judges? Is that what was mentioned? I believe it was mentioned, federal judges. Could it have been state judges or other kind of judge? I'm pretty sure that Bill Fulton told me federal judges. Okay, anybody mention the phrase, de jure grand jury? The only person who ever said that to me was a man named Jeremy Baker. Do you know if Jeremy Baker was in the meeting that night? Before? No, I do not. And was he in the context, did Mr. Baker tell you about this de jure, and in what context did Mr. Baker tell you about this de jure grand jury? The only context I've ever had with Jeremy Traverso. Objection, Your Honor, beyond the scope of direct. What does the court use the mic? Speak up. What has Jeremy Baker's got to do with anything that happened at night at Blondie's? Well, I think he's talking about something collateral. I think, Traverso, matter. I think That's what he's talking about. It may be collateral or not. What's the question to the witness? The question was, what did Mr. Baker explain to Mr. Bennett about the de jure grand jury? Scrocky, you mentioned you heard the phrase from Mr. Baker? Right, because Mr. Baker had a meeting at Denny's a little bit before this, and I was invited by a good friend of mine to come there. He had a meeting at Denny's, wanted to talk to people about the sovereignty movement, about the Uniform Commercial Code and things of that nature, which I know quite a bit about that. Can I stop you there for a second? Sir, so we can break it up just a little bit. So Mr. Baker asked you to attend a meeting at a Denny's? No, Mr. Baker did not. Who did? Wendell did. I cannot remember Wendell's last name. Okay, so let me hold. I just wanted to break this down into some. So Wendell asked you to a meeting at Denny's. So you went to this meeting. Yes, Wendell told me that the nature of the meeting was about, and he said, I know that you know about these things. I would like you to come. Okay, he said, if you will come, I will stand up and request that you get a chance to talk. All right. And this has to do with the sovereign citizenship thing, right? Okay, that's right. Okay, so Mr. Baker was there, and Mr. Baker was there, so there were a lot of people. Let me ask you, try to follow my questions real quick, okay? So we can, or just stay with me and we'll get to the story. Okay, so Mr. Baker was there, Wendell was there. Was Les Zerby at the meeting? I don't think so. Okay, that was pretty public. It was at Denny's. It was a packed house, all right. He went on his spiel about the sovereign movement, and then were you asked to stamp your driver's license? I wasn't asked to do anything. Was there anybody mentioning stamping driver's license at this meeting? Not that I remember. He was given an overview of how you became a sovereign citizen. Wendell, stood up and asked if I could speak. I got up to where in front of everybody and speak, and Your Honor, I'm going to object. This is beyond the scope. This is way beyond the scope. I'll pull back. Far afield. Yeah, the objection's sustained. Okay, so you went to this meeting at Denny's, and so that's the guy you heard Mr. Baker say to jure grand jury. Jeremy Baker had a bone to pick with me. Okay, that's something I'm not even going to get into. He came to Mr. Bennett, my store. Mr. Bennett, I'm not going to inquire about that. Okay, it's outside the scope of what they talked about, so I'm not going to get into that. Okay, so with respect to the circumstances of this meeting in your shop, Mr. Fulton was there, Mr. Cox is there, and this issue of this plan is essentially sprung upon Mr. Cox, correct? Exactly. So we spoke about it the night before. It's now out in public, isn't it? In front of all these people. Objection. I didn't get the cause for speculation. The first, Mr. Cox hasn't even been established at being at this meeting the night before. The court having a hard time hearing you, counsel. Hey, Traverso, why don't you speak up? It calls for speculation. Objection, Your Honor. Mr. Cox was never even addressed at being at the meeting before. He didn't know anything about who was at the meeting. Of course, the judge can't hear a dang thing because he's deaf. Scrocky, no, I'm talking about the meeting in the hotel room, counsel. Well, at the hotel or Scrocky with he that... Wait a minute. Now, you lost me. Let's start with a new question. Scrocky, okay. So, had Mr. Cox been in the meeting with Mr. Fulton and Mr. Baker and Mr. Zerby in the hotel at Pike's the night before? I was aware that Mr. Fulton was based on his account of it. Was in the meeting the night before with Schaefer Cox and Les Zerby. Okay, so if assuming Mr. Fulton's recollection and his explanation to what to you was accurate, Mr. Cox would have been surprised that all these people were here to hear about this plan that we talked about with Mr. Fulton, right? Of course. Thank you, Mr. Bennett. Any further questions on redirect examination by Mr. Traverso? Do you believe everything that Mr. Fulton was telling you that night, or did you have some questions about it? I believe what Mr. Fulton told me earlier in the morning. I no longer believed him by the time the evening came around. The Scrocky asked and answered Traverso. You were unaware of any meeting, any circumstance the night before, correct? Objection leading. Are you aware of any meeting the night before at Pike's Landing with Schaefer, where Schaefer had such a plan? Objection leading. He opened it up on, well, the question is leading in form, I think. Traverso, okay, going to rephrase it. Traverso, when you were at Blondie's, at your store, and Mr. Cox was there, what was the expression on Mr. Cox's face when this so-called plan was unfolded? Surprise at first, which turned to alarm, and more aggressive that Bill got, insisting that he had this plan. Okay, all right, and Mr. Cox got a word in edgewise with Mr. Fulton? Absolutely not. Thank you. No further questions. The court... Thank you, Mr. Bennett. You may be excused. Mr. Traverso, thank you. Well, we call Francis Schaefer Cox, Your Honor. The court, all right. Mr. Cox, if you'll come up and take the witness stand, if you'll raise your right hand and be sworn. Francis August Schaefer Cox, defendant Cox's witness sworn. Please be seated. Direct examination by Mr. Traverso. Would you please state your name for the record and spell your last name, please? Going to pause here on page 141. Okay, this is Schaefer Cox himself on the witness stand. This comes at like page 140 of a 200-page document. So this will be a subsection of a bigger reading, but I'll probably upload this all by itself since it's actually Schaefer Cox. So here we go. Francis August Schaefer Cox, defendant, Cox witness sworn. The court, please be seated. Direct examination. Traverso. Would you state your name for the record and spell your last name, please? Francis August Schaefer Cox, C-O-X. Okay, Mr. Cox, how old are you? 28. Well, I'm going to call you Schaefer for sake of quickness. Okay. Thank you. You have a where do you live normally? The jail? Where are you from? Where'd you live before you went to jail? Fairbanks? Okay, and how long have you lived in Fairbanks? Since 2000? Okay, and are you currently married or? Yes, I am. My wife Marty is right there in the audience. Okay, and do you have any children? Yes, we have 2 children. Okay, what kind of work do you do, Mr. Cox? We own a residential construction company. We had quite a bit of rental property before the raid. We also own a landscaping company that my wife is running right now. And I do work as an arborist in Fairbanks, like hazard tree removal and right-of-way maintenance and technical tree removal that are, really complicated to bring down with ropes and chains and chainsaws and climbing and spurs and flip lines and all that stuff. Okay, are you involved in a church group of some sort in Fairbanks? Yes, my wife and I are both very active in church life. My father is the pastor of University Baptist Church. Okay, were you involved at all as part of your church, were you involved in any activities with youth? Yeah, my wife and I, before we had children of our own, handled and facilitated and led all of the youth group activities and some of the children activities at the church. And we took, groups of church kids on backpacking trips or load them all up in, a bus and come down to Anchorage for events and doing cookouts and barbecues and events at our house. And, all the typical churches, group type stuff. My wife and I did that. Speak for a few years. Speaking about hiking, have you ever done any extraordinary trips of note with the outdoors? Yeah, well, my dad, who also here, sitting in the gallery, and my dad taught me how to backpack when I was a little boy, and we climbed most of the Colorado 14ers. Okay, go ahead. I spent more time with my dad growing up than I did with any other person, and that was really a precious time. It really shaped who I am. And Mr. Traverso, what does your dad do? My dad and I climbed Mount McKinley together just before I got married, kind of a last hurrah. Find out there's a lot more hurrahs left after you get married. It's certainly not the last one. But yeah, you were asking about that, and that's where it started, was in Colorado with the 14ers and then Mount McKinley. And that was good memories. But the first time I climbed Mount McKinley, I actually summited Mount McKinley 3 times. Okay. Led 3 separate expeditions. The first one was when I was 17, and it was with a guy who was 62 years old. He had never climbed before, but he was just an extraordinary athlete and really disciplined and temperate, and I was real young and vigorous. We're going to have to get some vigorous, and that's that. More stuff. Was a great team. That was the first time, and that was, I think, in 2001. Okay, and then I climbed it again 2 years later with my dad just before I got married, and then 2 years later after that I climbed it again with my best friend Joe Nichols and my wife. Okay, so Marty, it has the court. Okay, let the witness done it. Have you been involved with The court. Let's go just a second here. Let's go by question and answer now. Freaking stupid judge. Mr. Traverso. Okay, can you just try to keep your answers short and sweet and right to the point, okay? If you can recall, have you been involved in politics of any sort up in Fairbanks? Yes. Or statewide for that matter? Yes. Could you describe what your activity is? Well, let's see. I'd always been interested in, legal issues and theories of law and politics, and I suppose it started with my wife and I helped out with the Ron Paul campaign in 2008. Okay, let's stop. And let's stop right there. After the Ron Paul campaign, were you involved in any political campaigns in Fairbanks, local campaigns? Yeah. After we went to the Republican convention in Anchorage and led the Ron Paul delegation the next election cycle, before that I went to campaign school and then came back to Fairbanks and ran for the State House of Representatives in District 7 in Fairbanks. When was that? Do you remember approximately? That was 2008. 2008, okay. When you ran for office, did you win or lose? Well, it depends on what you call a win. We changed a lot of hearts and minds. We raised a lot of money. We proved a lot of points. That's definitely a win. We sharpened up the opponent. That's definitely a win. Didn't win the seat, but I think that I achieved more toward my goals, which was cultural change rather than holding an office. So we definitely accomplished everything that we set out to accomplish. I think we lost by, we had 37%, just a few percent behind Mike Kelly, who was real good for a first-timer, which was real good. I think we had 37%, just a few percent behind Mike Kelly, which was real good for a first-timer. Okay, now were you homeschooled or did you go to public school? I was homeschooled. My parents are both licensed teachers, or they've got education. Okay, degrees? Degrees. Okay, and they homeschooled me and my brothers and sisters and sister. Okay, now were you involved in any organization or any sort of Fairbanks after your campaign effort against Mr. Kelly, I guess it was, that you've mentioned? Well, I probably wouldn't characterize that as against. Okay, somebody was very, but yeah, after the State House campaign, we had generated this, very large base of support and all of these contacts and all of this networking, and had really done all of the moving and shaking, and we didn't want to let that stop. And what I was really passionate about, I didn't know if I really wanted to be down there in Juneau, stuffed in an office, fighting over bills. What I really like doing is contending for ideas. Just intellectual contest. I prefer running for office to holding office, quite frankly, and there was some in... Well, let's stop right there. Let's stop right there, just briefly. I'm sorry. When you talk about changing ideas, is there a philosophy that you're trying to express in doing this? Well, my philosophy is the same as Thomas Jefferson and Ben Franklin and Sam Adams and John Locke and Frederick Bastiat and all of those founding fathers. There's very, very little that they stand for that I disagree with. Okay? I think America had wonderful beginnings and has excellent roots. I think it's still the most outstanding country in this world. But we've kind of deviated from our roots, and I want to see us get back to those. Okay? And one of my piloting philosophies, one thing that I believe, and my father really helped me shape my philosophies when I was 10 years old. He was going through theological, lectures with him. No, that was great. That shaped me. Is this: our culture is not the product of our government. Our government is the product of our culture. And I think that we make a mistake when we try to find political solutions to cultural problems. It's very easy for us to all get out there and gripe and complain at the politicals for being, just a windsock and blows whichever way the wind is blowing. But what we've got to realize is that we are the wind. Okay? And that's something that I didn't quite realize till I ran for office, until I was, hobnobbing around with all of these political elites, is that they're really beholden to the cultural wind, okay, of the people. All right, thank you. Maybe what you could do is explain whether you espouse as part of your philosophy of changing the culture. You espouse the violent overthrow of government? No. Or are you anti-government? No, government is there, like the Declaration of Independence says. It says we hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, that to secure these rights, governments are instituted among men. So we need government to secure those rights, and I support that. And you touched on violence, and I got some answers on that. Okay, well, do you support changing the culture, as you say, through violence? No, I don't think you can change the culture through violence, and we have to understand what violence is. That is the use of force on another. And the only time that the use of violence is morally justified is to stop someone from hurting you. The use of violence is to protect your family. The use of violence to protect your family is morally proper. The use of violence to promote your fancies is not. And I'm accused today of believing the former. The court, wait a minute. Traverso, wait a minute, that's all right. The court, wait a minute. Mr. Traverso, you can't, it's not a speech. The court, let's go by question and answer now. Mr. Cox, let me try and explain this. You've got to answer your lawyer's questions. But after you've answered the question, you need to stop and wait for the next question, okay? Okay. The court, go ahead. Mr. Traverso, have you spoken about your views of the Constitution and the Founding Fathers and so on and so forth in a public setting? Yes, every chance I get, I do. Were you part of an organization of any sort when you did this? Did you belong to any recreational group or a reform group or a social change group? What kind of group did you belong to? Well, there's been a lot of groups that we generated in Fairbanks, and there's also been some that I participated in after the State House campaign. There was some troubling firearms legislation coming down the pike, and we organized the Second Amendment Task Force to sort of look at that and address that, and that was a huge success and a great educational tool. Okay, stop right there, Schaefer. When you organized the Second Amendment Task Force, where did you have your meetings? Boy, Denny's is sure happening place in Fairbanks. That's where we started. Okay. First one was in Denny's, and we couldn't fit in there for our second meeting. We just packed the place on our first one. And so then the next week we said, well, let's meet again. And we met in a church, and then we outgrew that place. And that was kind of one of our biggest problems, was finding places that were big enough to hold everybody. Okay, as part of the Second Amendment Task Force, let me ask you this. You had a very strong passion to change the culture. Do you do that? Is there a way that you like to try to do that? Do you do it through armed conflict? Miss Lamoureux, objection leading. Traverso, how do you do it? Well, you can't really change anybody unless you change their mind. And so you have to do that by the function of reason. And that happens through speaking to people. And people are reasonable. Okay, most of them. Now, you've been known for, as I understand it, a speech called the solution speech. Yeah, I didn't name it that. That's just sort of a title that's stuck. Okay, before we get into that, is the solution speech something that is byproduct of certain ideas that you have? Miss Lamoureux, objection leading. The court, sustained. Traverso, okay, where you're the solution speech. Can you tell us something about it? Yes, there was an event organized down in Chicago called the Continental Congress, and the purpose of that was to find 3 representatives from every state to come together and to talk about how we are going to get back to our roots as a nation. And after I was invited to speak, at different locations all over the country, so I sort of went hopping around giving these speeches, and they had a similar theme. And one thing I tried to work into that series of speeches and that set of ideas is that Miss Lamoureux, objection, Your Honor, this is Traverso. Okay, Miss Lamoureux, beyond the scope of the question. The court, sustained. Traverso, we want to just keep it right there. Okay. Did you belong to any organizations besides the Second Amendment Task Force when you were speaking, doing these speaking engagements? You just know, like the militia and I think the Liberty Bell Network and Interior Alaska Conservative Coalition, all these little groups that were sort of had their niche market, I was involved in pretty much anything I could get involved in. Okay, with the Second Amendment Task Force, let's start there. Affirmative. Did you at some point go to various officials to discuss the work that you were doing? Yeah. I think that we've read this declaration that we wrote up and everybody signed, and people would always say, well, is this just like a petition, or are you giving this to the legislatures or anything like that? Are you giving this to the legislators or anything like that? Or who's this going to? And we said, nobody, that's us. We're the people. We the people. We're the boss in this country, and so we're just agreeing, we're concurring. We took this declaration down, just a statement of principles that all these people agree on. Miss Lamoureux, objection, Your Honor, non-responsive. Traverso, just okay. The court, sustained. The witness, we took Mr. Traverso. I'll ask you the next question. Okay. After that, after you said you took this declaration to where, just say where you took it. We took it to anybody who might possibly be interested in it. We took it to the federal building. We went and we gave it to the FBI and the ATF and to the U.S. Attorney, and we went down to the trooper's office and we gave it to them, and we went to Fairbanks Police Department. We went every government, anybody that we could find. Just sit down and shake hands and look them in the eye and say, here's who we are and here's what we stand for, and we just thought that was a healthy thing to do. Okay, what is the Liberty Bell? I'm just going to tell you what it is. It is an automatic phone network, kind of like a phone tree. And if somebody gets in a situation where they think that some witnesses would be a helpful thing, you can make a Liberty Bell call, and a Liberty Bell operator will send out an instant message or text message or an email to anybody who signed up for that. And people just show up with their cell phone cameras and document whatever's going on. It's just a way to keep things on the up and up. Okay, did you also belong to help create the Alaska Peacemakers Militia? Yes. Can you talk to us first about what was it that led to the formation of this militia? What was it that led us to the what? Formation of that militia. Yes. Yes, we had an epiphany, we had this Second Amendment task force, and everybody was all real excited about that, and the Second Amendment is really short, it's 27 words. A well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of the free state, the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. Now the first part is instructive to the people, and the second part is restrictive to the government, and so, Miss Lamoureux, objection, non-responsive. Traverso, okay, we want to. The witness, oh, is this responsive? Oh, this is responsive. The court, well, Traverso, just hold on, Mr. Cox. The court, what's the next question, Mr. Traverso? Question. When you're talking about the Second Amendment Task Force, you said it started to generate interest into a militia. Was there any reservation about using the word or name militia? Oh yes, there was. It definitely has a very bad social stigma, and we didn't kid ourselves about that. We knew that. But we believe being consistent with the Constitution, and if it said that this in the Second Amendment, we should support the whole Second Amendment, and so in an effort to be consistent and just do it and see what we learn, we did it. We just tried to take the advice of the Founding Fathers and question, okay, the All-American. Now, was there some catalyst that generated interest in the militia? Was there something going on in your environment or some either local, national, or statewide that generated an interest in having a militia form? Not necessarily. There was definitely a sense, and I think there still is, that America is stepping into some shaky ground, especially economically. But we tried very hard to be defined by what we love and not by what we hate, and just to be doing something because it's good instead of just reacting to something bad. Okay, to be constructive. Tell us what the Alaska Peacemakers Militia, what the objectives of the Alaska Peacemakers Militia are. Okay, to protect your family and your neighbor's family, and that's pretty much it. It's an extension. Every individual has the right to life, liberty, property, and correspondingly to defend that. And if you have that as an individual, you can help somebody else defend what they already have a lawful right to defend. And there's really no objection beyond that. It's a totally dormant entity. The militia by design does nothing unless things fall apart. Okay, well what's the purpose of having a militia other than you protect your family? I mean, can't we protect our families with law enforcement? I mean, why have a militia? Well, it's really not law enforcement's job to protect you. They'd be protection enforcement if it was their job to protect you. It's their job to arrest people for violating the law and help to prosecute them. It's your job to protect you and your family. Okay. And they even said that when we went around and introduced ourselves, to them, Miss Lamoureux. Okay. Traverso. Okay, what was the court? Well, Traverso. Was the militia an open organization or a closed organization? It's totally open. Anybody can join. Now that's the Alaska Peacemakers Militia. There was 3 requirements: be 18, be male, and take an oath. And that's just because we took that from the founding documents. We didn't even come up with those ourselves. Okay, what's the oath that you're speaking of? Before God and man, for the sake of my conscience and the safety of my family, I will defend and observe the principles of individual liberty embodied in our founding documents by example, persuasion, and force of arms, and assist my neighbors as they do the same, never abandoning another who is fighting to live free. I will defend, I will discern justice, destroy. I can't remember the last clause, it's been a while. Okay, but it says defend all. The last clause is defend all, aggress none, and follow orders to that end. Okay, now you belong to an organization called the Alaska Assembly Post, or could you just... The Alaska Assembly Post is just a blog. It's a post like Miss Lamoureux. Objection, Your Honor. I'm not sure there actually was a question there. Traverso. Did you belong to the court? Well, what is the question? Traverso. Did you belong to an organization called the Alaska Assembly Post? You can't very well belong to a blog where people post their... You can't very well belong to a blog where people post their legal research. Okay, well, did you do any posting with this Alaska Assembly? Yeah, I was involved. I was involved in that, and I was involved in that. Okay, does that have anything to do with the sovereignty movement that has been spoken of in this case or referred to in this case? Yeah, that's basically what that is. Okay, explain to us what you mean by the sovereignty movement. Okay, well, the sovereignty and the sovereign citizen has been way overstated and convoluted when Miss Lamoureux. Objection, Your Honor! Traverso. Okay. Miss Lamoureux. Non-responsive! He's non-responsive! Traverso. Just the court. Sustained! The Traverso. Just the court. Jury, the witness. Indiscernible. Wait a minute! Traverso. Don't give your opinion, just the court. The jury should disregard. Traverso. Answer the question, don't the court. That gratuitous comment, that's not responsive to the question. Traverso. Just answer the question. The court. Try and just answer the question, Mr. Cox. The witness. Yes, sir. Will you restate the question for clarity? Mr. Traverso. Could you explain what you mean by the sovereign citizen or sovereignty movement? I don't know if they're both the same. Hello.
Hey, my brother, how you doing?
Okay, the phone rang and I had to answer the phone, but let's pick back up with Schaefer Cox's testimony, page 160. Okay. The court. This is a judge who can't hear anything. Try and just answer the question. Yes, sir. Will you restate the question for clarity? Traverso. Can you explain what you mean by sovereign citizen or sovereignty movement? I don't know if they're both the same. all that or not. When I say sovereign citizen, that the citizens are sovereign, all that means is that the people are the master and the government is the servant. Okay, is there some sovereign citizen movement to break away from the United States government? No, I would not say to break away from the United States government. What do you understand the sovereign citizens movement to be then, other than what you claim to have explained what the sovereign means? What does the movement mean? Miss Lamoureux.
Objection, Your Honor. I'm not sure what group Mr. Traverso's referring to here, and we're still talking about Assembly Post.
Mr. Traverso. Well, yes. The court. Rephrase your question, please. Traverso. Is the sovereignty movement associated with the Alaska Assembly Post or any organization like that? Yes. Okay, could you explain what it means? What it means, or what they do. Well, what do they do? Each state has an assembly post, and it's basically a clearinghouse, an online meeting place for people who are doing legal historical research to find out. Retrace how it got from 1787 and the Bill of Rights to right now. Because they're kind of different looking animals, and we want to retrace our steps and figure that out. It's educational. Miss Lamoureux.
Objection, Your Honor! Objection!
Traverso. Okay. Miss Lamoureux.
Non-responsive! Mr. Cox is non-responsive!
The court. Overruled. Traverso. Is it an organization that wants to violently overthrow the government? Miss Lamoureux.
Objection! He's leading the witness!
The court. No, he may answer the question. He may answer this question. The witness. No. Question. Okay, is the Alaska Peacemakers Militia group somehow associated with the violent overthrow of the government? Answer. Absolutely not. Now, at some point, did you get involved with the Continental Congress in conjunction with your activities with any of these organizations? Answer. Yes. Question. Okay, which organization were you involved with that did you go to as a representative to the Continental Congress? Yes, I did. What was that about? Can you explain that? Same thing, just cultural change in an effort to rediscover our constitutional rights. Where was that taking place? In Illinois. And were you some sort of delegate, or how is that you went there? Yeah, they actually sponsored elections in each state, and the liberty-minded people, constitutional crowd, chose 3 delegates from each state and voted on them and sent them down there for this convention. Okay, all right. I know that you were involved in a number of organizations, but you've also been very involved as sort of an activist in your community. Is that correct? Yep. Can you tell us are there some sort of guidepost that you believe is as far as your activism? All right, let me rephrase the question. You're an activist in the community in Fairbanks for what? For liberty and for rights of the individual. And how do you go about, and intellectual? Okay, how did you go about actualizing how did you go about with your activism? Were you involved in marching or protesting? What kind of activity were you doing as far as your beliefs? Pretty much all of the activity that I engaged in had one aim, and that was to change people's minds. Miss Lamoureux.
Objection, non-responsive!
Traverso. The court. Well, I think it was, the answer may stand. That answer may stand. Traverso. Okay, are there some sort of rules of engagement in your activism? Yeah, that's a pretty vague question. Okay, I don't, all right. I could, talk about that for hours. Were you all right? How do you believe in changing things if you don't? Okay, you don't believe in changing things through violence. How do you believe in changing things? By changing people's minds. Okay. By propositional truth. Whether it's to a group of people or going into local officials' offices and sitting down and talking with them, If you're talking about a specific strategy, I think maybe that's what you're getting at. Well, I'm going to ask you, your next question is, do you believe in guerrilla warfare? In what instance? Can you explain what you mean by guerrilla warfare? I mean guerrilla warfare. When I think of guerrilla warfare, I think of grassroots warfare, of a poor man's war, of either shooting in the streets, or Gandhi was a guerrilla warrior. Gandhi defeated the British using guerrilla warfare. Okay, do you believe in guerrilla passive aggressive? Okay, did you believe in changing society through guerrilla warfare? No, I don't think that's what will be necessary in America. I don't believe in changing society. I'm sorry, through guerrilla warfare. Okay, I think that it's out of the realm of possibility of coming to a town near you, but I think that it's not. Let me start over. I think that it's out of the realm of possibility of coming to a town near you, but it's definitely not necessary to change society. Okay, I believe that victory obtained by Miss Lamoureux. Objection, Your Honor! The court, wait for a question. Traverso. You expressed, do you have a three-pronged philosophy that you use as a change agent, I suppose, in what you speak of today? Yes, we had. Question, what is that? Some goals, and we had a three-pronged strategy to get there, and the first prong, oh, never mind. Yeah, I answered your question. Well, what are the three prongs? The three prongs, the first one was to undermine social sanction for heavy-handed law enforcement. The second prong was to establish friendly relations or any relations with local officials. The third prong was to be ready to and be able to take care of your family if society broke down. Okay, was there some training that was involved with the Alaska Peacemakers Militia, and did you have training sessions? Yeah, a lot more in the beginning, but then a lot less as we became more social than serious. Okay, where were these training sessions conducted? We all over different places. We'd go out to the shooting range, to the city shooting range. We'd go out to people's rural property. We'd all around town. Okay, did you do anything with well, let me ask you this. Was there some training in Salcha where you had a number of people there and somebody from Anchorage came up to help train you guys? Yes, there was. Okay, can you tell us what and when and where did that occur? We were out in Salcha at Phil Clark's family homestead. I think you remember Philip that was here. And we were just going through the basic shooting skills and maneuvers and stuff like that are in that little training manual. And there was an ex-Marine from Kenai that came up to provide training. Was that Rufus Reed? Yes, it was. Okay, and what age group of men showed up to this training session? Oh, man, of all ages. From all ages? Yeah. Okay, now, are uniforms issued for the Alaska's Peacemaker Militia? We have a uniform. Okay, and our ranks also? Are people assigned a rank in your organization? Yes. Okay, how does that come about? Well, when you join up, you're a private, and the longer you're there, the further you go up the ranks. If you go out and get a group of guys that are your guys, then you move up in rank, kind of indiscernible pyramid scheme. Okay, when you talk about your three-pronged social change agents, that is, I guess, the one I want to concentrate on for now is establishing friendly relationships with local officials. Could you tell us more about that, please? Affirmative. Historically, when the country rejects the idea of objective truth, people start doing nasty things to each other. And people don't like doing nasty things to people they know. Miss Lamoureux, objection! Traverso, okay. Non-responsive! Mr. Traverso, just answer the question shortly if you can. I guess my question to you is, when you say engage in friendly relations with local officials, give me an example of how you would do that, say, with the state troopers. Well, first step is to be above board with them and go down and talk to them and introduce yourself. And we don't have to agree on everything to start out being friends. We've just got to find something that we agree on and work from there. Okay, does that include going to, say, a trooper's home? I think in the appropriate situation, that's a good thing to do. Okay, why do you believe that? Because we're trying to make things personal. Question, I don't understand. Well, it's a small town. Barney Fife's not going to do bad things in Mayberry. He knows everybody. Okay, the other prong I wanted to ask you about, you just said to prepare and be ready to protect your families in the event of chaos yeah. Okay, can you explain what that means? What would you do What would you do in those circumstances? What I would do if there was chaos? What would I do if there was chaos? Yes, what do you mean that you would protect your family in the event? What kind of chaos are you describing? Miss Lamro.
Objection, Your Honor. Actually, the witness never used the word chaos. I don't believe that's...
Traverso. Okay. Miss Lamro.
Mr. Traverso's word.
Traverso. I'm sorry. The court. It's a fair objection. Traverso. How would you protect your family? Well, the first thing that I would try to do is get them out of harm's way. Okay. And if I wasn't successful at that, I don't think there's anything I wouldn't do to protect my family. Okay. If that's force of arms or hiding or whatever. In 2008, 2009, did you believe the government was going to collapse? I think eventually you can't spend your way out of debt. So I think eventually it'll catch up to them, but I don't think it's immediate danger. Okay, do you believe that there was a reason for the militia response to that potential collapse? Yes, could you explain that, please? Well, like I said, you can't spend your way out of debt, and we've got ourselves in a real precarious situation economically. And if things break down to where there's no money, everything else or what the money that you do have won't buy anything, everything else tends to go down with it. And at a point like that, nobody from the government's going to show up and save you. You're really just going to have your neighbors. And that was the point of the militia, was to know your neighbors. So if it hits the fan, you're not meeting them for the first time. Okay, is there some sort of when you can you give us an example of how the militia, under what circumstances a militia could help? For example, was there some public health crisis or something? Give us an example of how the militia would help in that instance. Well, the militia would be a good thing to have around every spring when the ice dams up the Tanana and floods Salcha. All the neighbors out there working, sandbagging. You take the earthquake that happened down here, the neighbors looking out for each other. That'd be a good time to have the militia around helping. The foods in the Fairbanks and the big one that flooded all the town. If there's just such an economic turmoil that people stop behaving themselves, then the militia would be a good deterrent for that. Okay, in your activism with the regarding firearms, did you believe in using force to change people's minds? I don't think you can change people's minds with force. You can change society with force, you can change government with force, but that doesn't necessarily mean violent force. Okay, explain yourself. Well, Gandhi used force by having all the Indians that followed him boycott cotton, and they were all wearing homespun. And that economic force crippled the British and made them treat the Indians good. Okay, that was a use of force to bring about social change. Can you explain certain situations where force of arms would have to be used in your approach to change? When life is in danger, wait a minute. Did you say when force of arms would have to be used to bring about change? I can rephrase the question if you wish. Give me that question again, because I might have. Can you give us some examples when force of arms would have to be used according to your beliefs? When it would have to be used according to my beliefs, yes. When there is no other option available to you and you have to choose between either killing someone or letting them kill someone who's innocent. That's an appropriate time. But you have to be on par. You can't shoot somebody for stealing your car because their life is worth more than what they're stealing. You can't shoot somebody for hassling you. You can't shoot somebody for beating you up. You can only shoot somebody if they're going to kill you. Okay? And that's the only time that for use of force of arms is appropriate. Was the militia oriented in that direction? Yes, and even if we put it on our uniforms, on our shoulder patch, it says defend all, aggress none. You can't force people to do things they don't want to do. I believe that's wrong. Traverso. Your Honor, if I may, Miss Lamro.
I'm sorry to interrupt. There is some typing. That's rather loud, and I don't know. I know that the juries before had voiced that it was a distraction.
The court. Yeah, stop the typing. That is causing others to hear you. Or move to the rear of the courtroom. Traverso. Is it possible that we could have a short break, Your Honor?
Well, it's just about that time. Okay, we'll take our afternoon break, folks. The matter stands in brief recess. Court recess, 2:50 p.m. until 3:08 p.m. Jury not present. All rise. His dishonorable court, the United States dishonorable court, is again in session. Please be seated. Mr. Traverso, I have one matter, Your Honor. Yeah. I have a couple more questions for Mr. Cox, but the foundation of this case has been Mr. Cox's speeches in the lower 48 that drew the attention of the FBI and the federal government. And we would like to try to play the signature speech called the solution speech in its entirety. I know it's going to take time, but how long is it? It's 1 hour and 39 minutes. Holy crow. Holy crow. Traverso. But that, and just for the record, that's your exhibit 6. Is that correct? Traverso. Yes, FSC 6. Thank you. Traverso. I was going to ask him a couple more questions, but before we got to it, but it's on video and I have the transcripts for the jury. The government isn't sure that it's relevant, but we're not going to object. Well, it's Traverso indiscernible. The court opened, it's opened, so Lamoureux, we played the clips. The court, okay. The court, identify it, Traverso, okay. Offer it, and okay. We'll go from there. Traverso, all right. You want to hear something good. I've got a tenant that's behind on the rent. I just called him and he hadn't been in touch with me because his 2-year-old dropped his phone in the dog dish, and this, I guess, when you hear a new excuse, you ought to accept it. I haven't heard that one before. Okay, anything else preliminary? Traverso, no, that's it from us, sir. And so that'll take up most of the rest of the afternoon. I think it'll take up most of the afternoon. The court, all right. I have a couple more questions of Mr. Cox, and then the court, sure. I'd like to play the speech. The court, okay, bring the jury in. Traverso, and just so you know, Your Honor, we're going to present the video, the speech, and we will have the exhibit later, and we had to do a conversion of this speech. It was a little difficult making the conversion. I'm using a very skilled magician back there that's very good at doing this, and we'll label it and get it on disc and have it as an exhibit. Okay, you'll show it on Traverso, yes, the big screen. All right, yes. Okay, Mr. Traverso, you may continue. Thank you, Your Honor. Mr. Traverso, I want to get to the skinny, Mr. Cox. Do you believe in the use of violence against the government? Miss Lamoureux, asked and answered. Traverso, no. The court, he may answer. The witness, well, yes and no. Clarify, please. Well, if your government is breaking the law, if they turn murderous like they did in Syria, then yes. But no, because by breaking the law and turning murderous, they're not the government anymore. They're criminals. All right. At some point, did you start making a lot of speeches out of state? Yes. Tell me where you traveled and what the signature of that speech was. Well, I traveled all over the Midwest to kind of any place that would invite me and pay my way, and the thing was kind of the same everywhere. It became known as a solution speech. Like I said, I didn't name it that. It just, people started videotaping these, posting them up online, and started circulating around and got kind of popular, and that's a name that stuck. Okay, thank you. Traverso. At this point, Your Honor, we're going to offer Exhibit FSC 6, and we have the transcript for the jury to follow along. Please don't wander away from your microphone. I'm sorry, we have FSC 6, and we have the transcripts to present to the jury. The court is, Traverso, got one for the judge. Lamoureux, do we get a copy? The court, I don't know, the proposed exhibit has been identified. FSC 6, Your Honor, pardon? FSC 6, and it will not be converted into the actual disc until, yeah, I understand that. Later on. Oh, I understand that. Traverso, okay. But the witness has not identified what you're referring to as FS. Okay, yes, sir. C6. Okay, we'll do that in a second. We'll do that now, actually, if you want. Traverso, you've seen yourself on a video in the solution speech, speaking out, speaking in public. The speech that you call the solution speech? Yes. Okay, you're familiar with it. You've done it. You know all about it, right? Yes. And you're familiar with the speech, the video transmission that I'm about to present to you, that I presented to you before? Yes, if it's the one I'm thinking of, it was the solution speech. Yeah, it's from around Thanksgiving time in, 2009 in Hamilton, Montana. Okay, I believe. Yes, okay, all right. Can we do that now, please? Has it been admitted? Traverso, yes. No, it hasn't. Oh, not yet. Can we move for its admission, Your Honor? No objection, no objection, no objection. Yes, all right. FSC 6 may be admitted. We're going to play this for you, but again, I want to repeat the instruction I gave you before. So what you're about to hear and watch a recording that has now been received in evidence. A transcript of that recording is provided to you to help you identify speakers and to help you decide what the speaker says. But again, I want to caution you that the recording is the evidence, not the transcript. If you hear something different on the recording than what you see in the transcript, what you hear and see on the recording is evidence and is controlling. So listen carefully, and you should understand the transcript will not be available to you during the deliberations. And I got signs from the jurors that they want to have. The clerk, they want them. The court, cheaters like I have. The court, like Mr. Freeman and I have. Did you get a copy, Miss Hayden and Mr. Dooley? Mr. Dooley, yes, sir. The court, that was some question you had. Yes, sir. The court, okay. Who's in charge of this? The clerk, we just have to give it a couple of seconds to warm up, and I had to shut it down and restart it. The court, now, can we cut it off? You have to have them do it. I don't have control. Cut it off. I don't know what everybody else's transcript, but mine is not in the right page order. Unidentified speaker. They're just missing. The court, it went from page 11 to 15, and so the transcript is no longer tracking the whole with the video. 13 and 14 were missing. Yeah, those were pages missing in mine. 12 and 14. Traverso, okay. Does anybody have them? Well, we don't have them, Your Honor. Pardon? We don't have them either. Okay, let's go ahead without the transcript, and somebody clue us in when we're back on page 15 in the transcript. Okay, turn off the lights and start it up. Video played. The court, lights, Denali, and Mr. Traverso. Mr. Cox, I have some questions to ask you, but I don't want you to answer my questions with long-winded answers. I don't want you to answer my questions with long-winded answers. I'm trying. As long as your speech is okay. When you talk about a second government, could you clarify for us what you mean by a second government? Do you advocate a second government? Well, the people are the government. You can't have a second government unless you had a second people. So it's more the people returning to our roots. It's a rebirth of the original ideas. So I use that to make a point. But I believe the people are the government, and there's no such thing as a second people. Okay, you can't have a second government, but I was just making a point there. Okay, a philosophical shift is what I'm talking about there. Okay, you also, when you speak about the need for these changes, you used a number of 3,500 members in the militia. Now, is that an accurate number? If you're using the definition that I gave there of what the militia is, anybody with a gun and a conscience, then yeah. But we certainly didn't have that many in APM. We kind of used the numbers from the Second Amendment Task Force and all these groups and tried to figure it as big as we could inflate to our numbers. What's the most liberal, largest number we could come up with, and that was that. So the definition I gave in the same sentence, then that'd be true. But we certainly didn't have that many in APM. Okay, is that what you call bluffing? Yeah. Okay, what is the difference between, I guess, you in your speech, what do you talk about? You do talk about force. I'd like you to clarify when you use force and what you mean by it. Well, there's social pressure, that's force. Nobody likes to be ostracized or embarrassed or poked fun at or given a bad name. And the Liberty Bell is using a force on police because when they become the object of publicized ridicule for their misconduct, that makes them feel bad. And so that feeling is a force. That's a form of force, you know. And when it just escalates up from there, of course, there's bloody, violent force, but it has to be appropriate to its application, the court. It's about time we took a break for the evening. You may step down for Mr. Cox, if you would. And ladies and gentlemen, we're facing another evening, and I want to again remind you of my instructions. Don't discuss the case with each other or anyone else. Don't let anyone talk to you about it. Don't read, view, or listen to any news accounts. Should there be any, don't communicate with anyone about the case through any means. Don't do any independent research in the internet or otherwise about any of the things that you've heard or discussed. Keep your minds open on all issues. You haven't heard anything yet. And enjoy the evening and come back tomorrow at 8:30 ready to go to work. Okay, you may be excused. Leave your materials on your chairs to court. The only additional thing I want to say is that I assume this transcript, which
was not very accurate. A lot of miswords here, but in any event, I expect it should be made part of the record, and I would assume should be marked also as court exhibit, not to go to the jury. Traversal right, and I will do that with my copy of it. And be sure that you get the right CD or whatever that is, Mr. Traverso. Will do. To the clerk. Will do. Okay, anything else tonight? No, Your Honor. See you in the morning. All rise. This matter is in recess until tomorrow at 8:30. The court is adjourned subject to call. And that's the end at page 186.